After I cheated, my husband sold our house, emptied our accounts, blocked my cards, and vanished. I couldn't believe the nonsense Nikki, my 7-year wife, had just thrown my way. In mere moments, I realized how little she truly valued me. We were at a mountain resort for her older sister Kirsten's bachelorette party, which spanned 4 days. This was Kirsten's 3rd marriage, and I couldn't help but ponder how she had managed to wrangle her current fiancé. Was it her wealth, or perhaps some form of coercion? Given her profession as a lawyer, I assumed she had likely coerced him into signing an extensive prenuptial agreement, possibly employing tactics reminiscent of medieval torture. The day prior to Wednesday, we opted to utilize one of the public hot tubs available at the resort. Earlier, Kirsten had jokingly cautioned us about the possibility of encountering undressed men in the hot tubs. I had dismissed it as jest, but it turned out to be true. It appeared that clothing was optional in these baths. As we immersed ourselves in the water, I noticed 5 men across from us, unclothed, confirming my earlier suspicion. They nonchalantly exited the tub, dried off, and lounged on their chairs, seemingly unfazed by their exposure. However, one individual, a tall, muscular man with long hair tied back in a ponytail, reclined on the grass beside the hot tub with one leg raised, drawing attention to his substantial endowment. I observed Nikki gazing at him with a distant look in her eyes. I suppose I should step back and give you a bit of background about us. My name is Ned Carson, and my wife is Nikki. I'm 39 years old, while she's significantly younger at just 32. Once upon a time, I served as a police officer, but my career came to an abrupt halt when I was shot several times in the line of duty, resulting in a health-related dismissal. This was before I crossed paths with Nikki. She was among the physical therapists who aided in my rehabilitation to regain mobility after my injuries. Walking remains a challenge for me, but I managed to get by. Following my departure from the force, I transitioned into private investigation work. Fortunately, much of my tasks involve desk work or surveillance from my car, minimizing the need for physical exertion. I partnered with a seasoned detective until his untimely demise from a heart attack. Assuming his responsibilities, I now report to my former boss's associate. Nikki and I dated, fell in love, and tied the knot. The initial 5 years of our marriage were blissful, or so I believed. However, a couple of years back, I received a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol, exacerbated by my 2-pack-a-day smoking habit. Despite medication, my carnal performance suffered, and attempts to quit smoking only left me irritable. Initially, Nikki appeared understanding, and we made efforts to navigate the challenges. Although my stamina waned, I prioritized her satisfaction. Yet, over time, Nikki underwent a transformation from a caring, affectionate partner to someone I scarcely recognized, bossy and prone to unwarranted outbursts. Nothing I did seemed to appease her anymore. To compound matters, our closeness dwindled over the past year, despite my efforts to salvage our relationship. It seemed futile. I held on to hope that our getaway to a mountain resort might reignite the flame between us, but it became evident that our situation was beyond repair. As I observed the man openly flaunting himself to Nikki with utter disregard, a sense of familiarity washed over me, yet I couldn't quite place him. Earlier on Thursday, Nikki mentioned going shopping with her sister, so I opted for a round of golf. Returning earlier than expected, I freshened up and dressed, hoping to treat Nikki to dinner and dancing, perhaps leading to closeness later. As I dressed, Nikki entered the room in a bathrobe, her hair damp and her cheeks flushed. Sitting on the bed, she gazed at me for a moment. "I thought you were going shopping with Kirsten," I remarked. "Changed my mind," she replied. "I went to the hot tub instead." "I see," I responded. "Any sighting of undressed men today?" "Oh yes," she said with a grin. "There was this guy with a ponytail named Ramon Torres. He's working at a film studio out west. You'd like him." That's when it clicked. I recognized him instantly. Indeed, Torres works at a film studio. Though his work may not grace the big screen, it tends to be rather subpar. "So you've gotten to know this Ramon fellow?" I remarked. "A bit," she admitted with a snort, "and some of his buddies." "I see," I said. "Did you have a good time?" "Best I've had in years," she confessed. "Was this your plan all along?" I inquired. Her demeanor shifted, the shrew returning. "Yes, it was," she admitted. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman before me. She met my gaze before continuing. "You have no idea. For years you were the only carnal partner I had, but the past 2 years have been pure torment. I crave closeness, yet you can't perform half the time." "Do you know why?" she challenged. "It's those damn medications the doctor prescribed," I retorted. "It's not my fault." "Of course it's your fault," she fired back. Years of smoking, drinking, junk food, and neglecting exercise. Now you're paying the price, and so am I. I need a real man, someone well-endowed, someone who doesn't bend to my every whim. I need someone who takes charge, not someone who sits behind a desk and avoids confrontation. I felt as though I'd been sucker punched. I couldn't wrap my head around what she was confessing. I shook my head in disbelief, questioning if this nightmare was real. But she wasn't finished. "Do you know what he did?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "He ordered me to strip right there in front of everyone." "And you complied?" I inquired, already anticipating the answer. "Of course I did," she replied, shedding her robe to reveal her undressed body. "And did you have physical involvement with them too?" I asked, though I already suspected the truth. She chuckled as she revealed, "Have physical involvement? No. I had lovemaking with them, all of them. Even engaged in a trio activity. And yes, I let them all have their way with me. And you know what else?" "What?" I responded quietly, trying to contain my fury. "They're on their way here now, ready to ravage me in this bed while you watch," she declared. I rose from the bed and retrieved my suitcase from the closet. "What are you doing?" she queried. "Running away like a coward." I took a deep breath and counted to 10 before replying. I remembered what it was about Ramon that drove me insane. He had a vile tendency of ensnaring women with lovemaking and medications, then coercing them into adult films. Once done, he'd cast them aside, leaving them to fend for themselves as fallen women. The authorities tried to stop him numerous times, to no avail. "If you were wise, you'd flee too," I advised. "But wisdom isn't your strong suit, is it? Have your fun if you wish, but it's over between us. Give my regards to your sister." With my suitcase packed, I made my way to the door. "You're just going to leave me?" she taunted, a smirk on her face. "Yes, I'm leaving," I declared. "I'm tired of your antics and I refuse to be your compliant, betrayed man. Farewell." With those final words, I exited the room. Walking down the hallway, I spotted Ramon and his entourage strolling in my direction. Once they passed, I called out to him. "Ramon!" I shouted. He turned, meeting my gaze. "What's up?" he inquired. Removing my wedding ring, I tossed it to him. "She's all yours if you want her," I stated as he caught it. "I'm finished with her." He smirked, slipping the ring into his pocket. "Whatever you say, man," he replied, chuckling before sauntering off. Heading to my car, I loaded up and drove away, stopping to grab a pack of cigarettes and a 6-pack of beer. At that moment, I was indifferent to my fate, opting to drown my sorrows or break something. 3 hours later, I arrived home, half expecting a call or apology from Nikki, but none came. Forget it, I thought to myself. With plenty of time left in the day, I took matters into my own hands. If Nikki believed she could indulge in her escapade and return home as if nothing happened, she was sorely mistaken. I called a locksmith and arranged for all the locks to be changed promptly, willing to pay extra for swift service. Grabbing a beer, I sat on the back porch with a notepad, jotting down tasks to tackle. Having dealt with enough cases involving infidelity, I knew the routine. Typically, the husband got the short end of the stick, while the wife walked away with half. Aware that I couldn't file for divorce on grounds of infidelity due to no fault. Regulations, I made note of it. After drafting my plan, I indulged in a few more beers and cigarettes before retiring to bed, hoping to awaken from this dreadful nightmare. However, that scenario didn't unfold. The following morning, I rose and checked my phone, desperately hoping for a change of heart from Nikki, but it never came. No calls, no texts, complete silence. I sipped my coffee and phoned Nick Parsons, a prominent lawyer we both knew well. After recounting the situation, he assured me he'd draft divorce papers. We agreed to serve Nikki at her workplace on Monday for maximum impact. "You know the drill, Ned," Nick cautioned. "Don't do anything reckless." "You've got me," I assured him. "I mean it," he reiterated. "Speak to your boss about arranging someone to watch over your wife. And, Ned, I don't want you involved in this mess. Stay clear as much as possible." "Understood," I acknowledged. After our conversation, I rang my boss, Paul Drake. "Hey, Ned, thought you and your wife were off in the mountains," he remarked. "What's up, everything okay?" "Not really, Paul," I confessed. He listened as I shared my tale. "Damn," he muttered once I finished. "That's rough. Want me to send someone to keep tabs?" "Yeah, that'd help," I agreed, "but it has to be someone unfamiliar to Nikki." "I've got it handled," Paul assured me. "I've dealt with situations like this. Follow Nick's advice and stay out of trouble. I'll dispatch someone pronto." "Thanks, Paul, I appreciate it," I expressed before ending the call. I proceeded to the bank to handle our accounts, splitting them and canceling Nikki's credit card. While I considered canceling her ATM card, I opted to keep it active to monitor any charges she might make. But I reduced the daily withdrawal limit. Once done, I visited another bank to open an account solely in my name. I stopped at a diner for a pastrami sandwich before heading home, realizing there was nothing more I could do but wait. Eventually, I felt it was time to take stock of myself. I needed to take action. Stepping on the bathroom scale, I noted my weight, 98.8 kilograms. Examining myself in the mirror, I saw remnants of my former physique, but some fat had accumulated, and my once toned muscles had softened. No wonder Nikki had lost interest in closeness, I mused. Frankly, I wouldn't be eager for closeness either in my current state. I recalled the doctor's advice about managing my diabetes by maintaining a weight below 200 lbs. Despite initially disregarding his nutrition guide, I now reconsidered. Perhaps in a way Nikki was correct. I'd allowed myself to deteriorate. However, she didn't need to resort to her actions. If she truly loved me, I reasoned, she would have communicated her concerns earlier. Determined to enact change, I resolved to overhaul everything right then and there. Grabbing the phone book and a pack of cigarettes, I headed out to the back porch to search for nearby gyms. After finding a couple, I planned to check them out. Just as I was about to leave, my phone rang. Seeing an unfamiliar number, I answered anyway. "Carson," I greeted. A female voice on the other end spoke up. "Ned, where are you?" she inquired. I recognized Kirsten's voice. Though we hadn't spoken much before, I was surprised by her call. "Yes, I left last night," I confirmed. "Why do you ask?" "We were just wondering what happened," she explained. Nikki seemed really upset and retreated to sulk. "I've never seen her like this. She mentioned there was a fight between you two and you left." "What's going on?" she inquired. "Maybe you should ask her," I suggested. "Is everything okay between you two?" she pressed. "No, that's not the case," I responded. "Did you know Ramon Torres and his team are at the resort?" "Yes, they're providing entertainment for our bachelorette party," she confirmed. "I also arranged for them to bring a film crew." "Why?" I probed. "Just curious," I evaded. "Did Nikki know?" I asked. "Yes, I told her," Kirsten replied. "To be honest, I was surprised when you showed up. It was supposed to be a girls' thing, but if you're both into that lifestyle, then it's none of my business." "So you knew she planned to do that with me there?" I clarified. "Yes, we all knew," she admitted. "Why do you ask? Is there a problem?" "Nothing I can't handle," I assured, keeping my cards close. "Do you want me to tell Nikki to call you?" Kirsten offered. "No need," I declined. "Just let her enjoy herself." "Okay," Kirsten advised. "She still loves you. When she's done, she'll come back to you. It's just lovemaking." "No, it's more than that," I disagreed. "It's a heartless, calculated betrayal, and you facilitated it." "Please calm down," Kirsten dismissed. "It's just a weekend. You'll pick her up on Sunday, right?" "No," I stated firmly. "She can find her own way back, but she's not welcome here." I heard Kirsten gasp, but I brushed it off. "Goodbye, Kirsten," I concluded, ending the call. Frustrated and angry, I contemplated punching a wall, but instead went to the gym. Channeling my rage into the punching bag until my arms grew weak, then took a shower. "Are you all right?" a man inquired as I was dressing. I glanced up to see one of the trainers standing nearby. "Not really, but thanks for asking," I replied. "I noticed you on that punching bag," he remarked. "I was concerned you might hurt yourself. Do you want to talk about it?" "What the heck?" I pondered, taking a seat. I took a deep breath. He joined me on the bench, patiently waiting. Eventually, I divulged the entire story. "I'm sorry to hear that," he sympathized. "Please call me Ned," I requested. "Okay, Ned," he responded. "Listen, if you're looking to get back in shape, I can assist you. But I think you need more than just weight loss. I can recommend a good counselor if you're interested." Reflecting for a moment, I realized he was correct. I was a wreck, both physically and emotionally. "What the heck?" I agreed. "Looks like I could use all the help I can get." He chuckled, handing me a business card. "Rose Carlson, counselor," it read. "Give her a call," he suggested. "She's excellent, especially in situations like yours." "Yes, I'll do that," I affirmed. "By the way, I couldn't help but notice you avoid putting weight on your right leg," he pointed out. I explained about my injury from the shooting. He listened attentively, nodding in understanding. "I can assist you with that if you're interested," he offered. "We can also guide you with your diet and exercise routine, particularly tailored for individuals with diabetes. Are you ready to commit to this?" After pondering, I responded. "Absolutely," I affirmed with a nod. I knew I needed to take action, and quickly. "All right," he agreed. "Let's get you signed up. By the way, I'm John Green." He offered his hand, and I shook it. "Ned," I introduced myself. "Ned Carson," he repeated. "Wait a minute, you're the cop who saved my grandmother during a bank robbery, right?" "This was about 8 years ago." I was shot during that robbery, I confirmed. It's great to finally meet you. How's your grandmother? I inquired. She's doing well, John confirmed. Thank you for asking. Guiding me to the front desk, John enrolled me in a program designed to help me shed weight and regain strength. He introduced me to his colleagues, highlighting my heroic past, and they expressed gratitude for my service. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, John offered as we concluded, and be sure to get in touch with Rose. I will, I promised. Thanks for everything, John. Exiting the gym, I felt a sense of upliftment I hadn't experienced in a while. It was refreshing to receive appreciation from someone. Upon returning home, I scheduled an appointment with Rose for the following Tuesday. Though I held on to a sliver of hope for contact from Nikki, none came. However, Paul reached out to inform me they had an operative observing Nikki and would update me accordingly. Thanks, I acknowledged, relaying my plans to meet with Rose. All right, Paul replied. It's good to see you taking positive steps, Ned. Take your time sorting things out. I'll keep you posted on our observations from the resort. Just try to stay calm, all right? I gotcha, I assured him, wrapping up our conversation. I attempted to unwind, but relaxation proved elusive. A part of me yearned to drown my sorrows in drinks, yet my rational side intervened. Throughout the weekend, I anxiously awaited news but heard nothing until Sunday around 1:01 a.m. Paul reached out, informing me that Nikki had departed with Ramon and his team earlier that morning. Looks like she had a packed weekend, he remarked, detailing the array of evidence they had gathered. I'll pass all this on to Nick and provide you a copy if you're interested. Any idea where they went? I queried. Not a clue, Paul admitted. They left around 9 a.m. Got it, I acknowledged. Assuming she returns, she should be back around noon, Paul agreed. That's the plan. Keep me posted if she turns up, he urged. Will do, I affirmed, concluding our exchange. Taking a leap of faith, I dialed Nikki's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Nikki, call me back when you can, I left a message. I know you left the resort. Call me. Ending the call, I dialed Kirsten's number and she picked up after the third ring. Hey, Ned, she greeted me. You missed quite the party. Yeah, I gathered, I replied. Looks like Nikki took off with Ramon? Yeah, they left early today, she confirmed. Any idea where they're headed? I inquired. No clue, she admitted. I figured they might be heading your way, but I can't say for sure. Do you even care if she comes back? Hey, don't take it out on me, she snapped. Nikki's an adult. She can do what she wants. If she decides not to come back, that's not on me. Now leave me alone. With those words, she concluded our conversation. I stashed my phone in my pocket and settled into the living room, waiting. It's remarkable how time seems to drag when you're watching the clock. The minutes crept by slowly. Soon it was noon, and Nikki was still nowhere to be seen. I waited anxiously, but there was no sign of her. Another hour passed with no word from Nikki, and my voicemail remained unanswered. I tried using a search app on my phone to locate her, but it was fruitless. It appeared she had powered off her phone and removed the battery, making tracking impossible. Switching to my computer, I checked my email, but there was nothing. I continued to wait, growing increasingly restless. By 6 p.m., there was still no sign of Nikki. I began to worry that she hadn't made it home or, worse, had been in an accident along the way. I reached out to Paul, who made inquiries, only to discover that she hadn't been admitted to any hospital and hadn't encountered law enforcement as far as he knew. On my way, an idea struck me, prompting me to return to my computer. I reasoned that if she used her card at the moment, the transaction would show up in our account. Upon accessing the online banking portal, I noticed a charge of $200 million saved around 9:45 a.m. at the airport, conveniently located near the resort. This amount matched the daily limit I had set on her card on Friday. With this information, I speculated that she had chosen to fly off with Ramon and his entourage, but to where? Opening another browser window, I searched for flights departing from that airport and found options to Los Angeles, Miami, San Francisco, Dallas, and Seattle around 11:000 a.m. Knowing Ramon resided on the West Coast, I surmised that might be her destination, yet certainty awaited her next card usage. I briefed Paul on the latest developments. We'll need to wait for her next card usage, he reasoned. That may not occur until tomorrow at the earliest, I replied. And by then, she could be anywhere. Have you considered reporting her missing? He inquired. The police typically require a 24-hour absence before acting, I informed him. Then waiting seems to be our only option, he concluded. Is there any clue in the video transcripts about her intended destination? I probed. It's possible. We might need to comb through it meticulously, he suggested. Are you up for the task? I must do something, I affirmed. There has to be a clue about her whereabouts. All right, come over to my place and we can delve into this further, he offered. But I must warn you, the footage isn't pleasant. I don't care, I asserted. I need to unravel this mystery and determine if she'll ever return. Then come, he urged. We concluded our conversation, and I drove to Paul's house, within the bounds of the law. Upon arrival, his wife Donna greeted me at the door. Can I offer you a drink, Ned? Coffee, perhaps? Or would you prefer a beer? She inquired. I need to gather my thoughts, I replied. Coffee would be perfect, thank you. All right, she acknowledged. Paul's in his office, so head straight there. Making my way to Paul's home office, I observed him poring over a thick stack of papers. He glanced up as I entered. Come in, Ned, he welcomed. Take these and see what you can uncover. Handing me the papers, I settled in to examine them. As expected, the contents were far from pleasant. Mostly, it consisted of Nikki pleading for more intense and rapid physical involvement, accompanied by crude remarks from Ramon and his associates about her attributes. Much of it was repulsive and immature, in my opinion. I couldn't ignore the obligatory insults directed at me from Nikki and her paramour. It's a shame your sorry husband was too spineless to stick around, Ramon remarked. Yeah, well, he's missing out, Nikki retorted. He'll never lay a hand on me again. He handed me his ring when he left, Ramon informed her. Said you're all mine now and it's over with him. Laughter ensued. Maybe I'll urinate on him for old time's sake, she joked. More laughter. In that moment, I questioned what I ever saw in her. Good riddance to bad rubbish, I mused. We continued to sift through the transcripts, searching for any clue. Suddenly, Paul exclaimed, Hold on, he interjected. I think I found something. What is it? I inquired. It was late Saturday night, around 11:45 p.m., he explained. Here, read this. Let me know your thoughts. Accepting the transcript, I began reading a few lines prior to the indicated point to grasp the context more fully. Man, boss, she's the best we've had in a long time, remarked one of Ramon's accomplices. We could rake in a ton of cash with this chick's assets. You really think so? Inquired Ramon. Oh, absolutely, chimed in the other henchman. What do you say? Ramon asked, ready to make some serious dough. I'm not some damn floozy, Nikki retorted. Laughter ensued. No, sweetheart, I'm talking about movies, online videos, clarified Ramon. With your incredible body and pretty face, all you need to do is what you're doing now, but in front of the camera. It's natural for you. I've been brainstorming a whole new series of betrayed man's movie and humiliation videos, and you'd be perfect for it. Yes, when can I start? She inquired. We could head out right after the party if you're up for it, suggested Ramon. I'll set you up with a nice place in Los Angeles, and you'll work exclusively for me. Of course, I'll take a cut, but you could make a fortune with enough videos. Can I get some more of that stuff you gave me earlier? She asked. And a bit of that euphoria pill? Whatever you desire, babe, he assured her. So I get all the lovemaking I want and get paid? She questioned. And I get to humiliate losers like Ned? That's the idea, confirmed Ramon. You can count me in, she affirmed. What about your pathetic husband? Inquired one of the accomplices. Are you going to spill the beans to him? Screw him. He's ancient history, she declared. He'll never lay eyes on me again. When do we leave? First thing tomorrow, stated Ramon. We'll depart at 9 in the morning, hit the airport, and head west. Hell yeah, she exclaimed. Let's do it. I handed the transcript back to Paul. Do we have this on video? I queried. Yep. Let me just grab the disc and fire it up, he replied, inserting a disc into his computer. He played the video, skipping to the timestamp indicated in the transcript. He glanced at me before hitting play. Ready for this? He inquired. Let's just get it done, I replied. He pressed play on the video, and I observed the scene unfolding through Nikki's room window. She lay undressed on the bed, accompanied by Ramon and his associates, one of whom wielded a camera. A tray with multiple white powder shots sat nearby, evident from Nikki's behavior. I scanned for any other figures but found none, though I wouldn't be surprised if Kirsten was involved. We watched the video while following along with the transcript. After their conversation, they engaged in group lovemaking again. That's enough, I muttered in disgust. Turn it off. Paul shut down the video and glanced at me. Well? He prompted. She's clearly participating willingly, even under the influence of white powder and who knows what else, I explained. So there's no basis for a kidnapping charge, and I didn't spot Kirsten in the video, so it's unlikely she's aware. Even if she knew, she wouldn't speak up. However, we should still make an earnest attempt to locate her for notification purposes. Do you have any contacts in Los Angeles? Paul asked. You know I have connections everywhere, I reassured him. I'll make some calls and see what I can find. Once you locate her, inform me. I want to deliver the documents personally, I added, though the weight of my emotions pushed me toward action. Absolutely not, Ned, Paul objected. That's not happening. I know you're in a lot of pain, but you shouldn't involve yourself any further. I know you well. You might do something rash, and I'd have to bail you out of jail. Stay put. Let Nick and me handle this. I'll revoke your license if you even consider leaving, understand? Understood, I conceded, raising my hands. I'll behave, I promise. You better, Paul warned. I'll make some calls and update Nick. Don't worry, I'll keep you informed. Now go home, relax, and take a few days off. In fact, consider yourself on vacation effective immediately. I can't do that, Paul, I objected. I have a business to run. Everything's under control. Consider it an order, Paul repeated sternly. You're on vacation starting now. Okay, I acquiesced, sensing the seriousness in his voice. I'm on vacation. I'll behave and head home. We shook hands, and I left, thanking Donna for the coffee. I briefly considered grabbing a beer, but opted to drive home instead. It turned out to be a good decision, as the house phone rang just as I stepped into the living room. Hello, I answered when I picked up the receiver, seeing Kirsten's number on the caller ID. I activated the recording feature on my answering machine. Hi Ned, it's Kirsten, she greeted. Yes, I recognize the number, I responded, and I should let you know I'm recording this conversation. I hope that's all right. Of course, she replied. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably do the same. So, what's on your mind, Kirsten? I inquired. I just heard from Nikki, she revealed. She asked me to represent her interests in case you decide to file for divorce. Do you know where she is? I probed. She mentioned she's in Miami now, but she plans to move around a lot and may not return soon, Kirsten disclosed. In Miami, huh? I remarked, suspecting she was either lying or being misled. I see. That's what she told me, she confirmed. She also mentioned that you're likely considering divorce? That's correct. Divorce proceedings are underway, I confirmed. Once they're prepared, send them my way, she instructed. I'll email you my address. I'll relay the message, I assured her. Were you aware of her intention to leave me and pursue a career in adult films with Ramon Torres? I questioned, letting my curiosity simmer. No, Ned, I had no idea, she admitted. I understand you may not think highly of me, but I'm being sincere. I thought she was merely using her involvement with him to provoke a reaction from you. I didn't realize she intended to leave. It was quite a shock when she told me. I know you're fundamentally a good person, Ned, so please accept my apologies. Did you know about the medications he administered to her? I pressed. White powder and euphoria pills? She replied quickly. I knew about the euphoria pills, but not the white powder, she added. We all took some euphoria pills that night, but I didn't see any white powder. You know what he does with the girls he recruits, right? I questioned. He makes adult films, she clarified. He specializes in group videos and humiliation. He decided to start a new series featuring more mature amateur women like Nikki. But I didn't know he had his eye on her. You didn't answer my question, I reminded her. Do you know what he does with them? I don't understand you, she responded, sounding confused. Don't play dumb, Kirsten, I insisted. He exploits them, drains them, then he casts them out onto the streets where they're forced to do anything for their next fix. Is this what awaits your sister? How long do you think she'll last? Is this a concern for you? She asked, her tone tinged with disbelief. Oh, please, I retorted sarcastically. No matter how much I despise her now, I wouldn't wish this fate on anyone, not even you. Where's your concern for your sister? It's none of your business, but I'll take her in before I let this happen to her, she stated firmly. Make sure she knows that, I insisted. From what I know about him, he'll probably discard her within 5 years, maybe less. I hope you have a spare room ready. You don't have to worry about the size of my place, she assured. All I need to know is what you want in the divorce. You'll find out soon enough, I informed her. Very well, she acknowledged. Do you want me to relay a message to Nikki? She offered. No, I declined. I have nothing to say to her at the moment. Well then, I suppose we have nothing further to discuss, Ned. Once again, I'm sorry this happened. Instruct your lawyer to send the documents directly to me. Any communication will be through me, she concluded. Goodbye, Kirsten. After ending the conversation and stopping the recording, I called Nick and briefed him on Kirsten's statements. Representing her own sister's interests right after enabling her actions, he remarked. Isn't this unethical? I inquired. No, not necessarily, Nick responded. But it certainly doesn't look good. We'll send Kirsten a copy of the documents, but I want to see if we can locate your wife and inform her in person. There's too much risk that Kirsten won't deliver the documents to her sister and then claim she wasn't properly notified. Do you think she would really do that? I inquired. Oh yeah, Nick confirmed. You'd be surprised at some of the things I've seen her do. I'll speak with Paul and see if we can locate Nikki. If not, we'll resort to what's known as divorce by publication. What does that entail? I asked. Well, when a spouse absconds and can't be located, we can pay to publish the divorce notice in a newspaper where she's likely to come across it at least once a week for 4 weeks, he explained. If she's indeed in the Los Angeles area, as we suspect, we'll publish it both locally and in the LA Times. And of course, we'll still send a copy of the documents to Kirsten, right? I clarified. Absolutely. Sending it to Kirsten doesn't guarantee Nikki's notification, Nick affirmed. We continued our conversation before eventually ending the call. I grabbed a snack, smoked a cigarette, and retired to bed. Over the ensuing weeks, we monitored Nikki's at-the-moment activity and deduced that she was likely situated in the Long Beach, California vicinity. Paul reached out to his contact in Los Angeles and discovered that investigators had spotted her at various nightclubs, where she had been performing on stage, though pinpointing her exact whereabouts remained elusive. Pat Silva, Nikki's supervisor at the therapy clinic where she worked, rang up to inquire about her absence. Upon learning that Nikki had decided on a career change, I calmly informed her of the situation. What do you mean, career change? Pat queried. Haven't you heard? I responded. She's chosen to pursue a career in adult film. What? Pat exclaimed. Yes, I aspired, explaining further. She's an adult film star and a medication user. She's somewhere in Southern California pursuing her dream as we speak. I'm surprised she didn't inform you. Ned, you better not be joking, Pat cautioned. I'm afraid it's true, I confirmed. So, she won't be returning, right? Pat sought reassurance. I'd be very surprised if she did, I admitted. Okay, I'll process her final payment and terminate her employment, Pat decided. Where should I send it? For now, you can mail it to me, I replied. I'll pass it on to her lawyer. All right, Ned, Pat said. I'm sorry to hear about this. She'll be missed. Thank you, Pat, I acknowledged, concluding our conversation. I received Nikki's last paycheck and forwarded it to Kirsten, as pledged. Whether she related to Nikki, I couldn't say, nor did I particularly care. I commenced my sessions with Dr. Rose, who proved to be an excellent therapist, attentive and understanding. Initially fearing I might face blame for Nikki's actions, I was relieved to find Dr. Rose didn't attribute fault to me. By the end of the first month, I began to feel noticeably better. Regular visits to the gym also contributed to my well-being. Shedding a few pounds, I adopted a sustainable diet with John's assistance. Before long, I started to catch glimpses of my former self in the mirror. Nick was also occupied. After crafting a notably biased divorce petition, he ran it in the local newspaper and the LA Times, twice weekly for 4 weeks. As the 4th week neared its close, he graciously sent Kirsten a copy, which left her dissatisfied. She demanded an urgent meeting with me and Nick in his conference room. What does all this mean? She demanded upon our gathering. This is an affront, not a divorce request. What's the aim behind demanding a 75/25 split with no alimony? The true affront is what your client did to her husband, with your assistance, I might add. Given her decision to abandon the marriage, my client and I believe this is the appropriate course of action, Nick asserted. She didn't even bother to remove her belongings from my client's home. He hasn't even been served the papers yet, Kirsten seethed. That's because your client was evading in the Los Angeles area, Nick explained. Since we lacked her address and you weren't forthcoming about her whereabouts, we resorted to filing for divorce by publication. A 4th notice has just been published in both the local and LA Times. I'll contest this, you'll see, she threatened. As you wish, Nick replied, and contest she did. She filed motions that went nowhere and requested counseling, which the judge reluctantly sanctioned. I was taken aback when Nick informed me of this. Don't fret, he reassured. Judge Potter despises traitors and favors law enforcement. Kirsten thinks she's in control, but in reality she's giving Nikki just enough rope to hang herself. What do you mean? I inquired. Nikki likely won't show up for the counseling, he predicted. Judge Potter detests disobedience to his orders. In such cases, he's likely to issue a bench warrant for her arrest. That's what I hope for, I expressed. I arrived punctually at the counselor's office designated by the court, but predictably, Nikki was a no-show. I knew the counselor, Judy McGregor, from her previous work with me after I was shot. We spent an hour catching up, during which I recounted my story. I gather you can't fathom reconciling with your wife, she deduced. Not at all, I affirmed. All right, she acknowledged. I'll report this to the judge along with her absence. Best of luck, Ned. It was good to see you again. According to Nick's later account, Judge Potter was incensed by Nikki's disregard for his orders and issued a bench warrant for her arrest. He informed me the warrant remained valid for 5 years. We continued to monitor her at-the-moment usage and observed that, while most of her transactions occurred in the Long Beach area, she also made multiple withdrawals in San Francisco and San Diego during the same period. It appears she was quite active. Simultaneously, I conducted a search and found several brief videos featuring her. I could only endure watching them for a few minutes and noticed they all involved the same group scenes of carnal activity and humiliation, purportedly targeting a husband. I felt nauseated, realizing that this was likely what she wanted to subject me to. Finally, a court date for our hearing was scheduled. I met Nick at the courthouse, and we entered together. Scanning the room, I spotted Kirsten, but Nikki was nowhere to be found. When our turn came to approach the bench, Nick and I took our seats and observed Kirsten sitting alone at her table. Judge Potter expressed his dissatisfaction at seeing her unaccompanied. "And where is your client?" he inquired. "She's not feeling well at the moment," Kirsten responded. "Unwell?" questioned Judge Potter. "What does that mean?" "She's currently working," Kirsten added. "Working?" the judge repeated. "She's an adult film actress, for heaven's sake. Are there no breaks in her schedule? Is her job more important than this divorce?" "She simply couldn't make it, Your Honor," Kirsten argued. Judge Potter sighed heavily and glanced at the documents before him. "Very well," he conceded. "Considering this, I will issue another court order, and I am prepared to finalize the divorce decree in court today." "But, Your Honor, we still need to file motions," Kirsten interjected. "I've seen all I need to see, counsel," the judge retorted, clearly irritated. He paused, then continued after surveying both parties. "While there are guidelines governing court awards, it's important to note that in this state, the bench possesses significant discretion in determining marital property division," he explained. "Upon reflecting on this case, I acknowledge the merits of both sides. On one hand, there's a highly decorated former police officer who risked his life protecting a 70-year-old grandmother. On the other hand, there's a woman whose attorney concedes she's a medication-abusing adult film actress who deliberately betrayed and deserted her husband to pursue her depraved lifestyle. And it's my understanding, counsel, that you played a role in facilitating some of your client's actions. I must admit, this is deeply troubling. I reached out to the state bar, and they confirmed no ethical breaches occurred. However, though you came close to crossing the line, I advise caution in the future," he stated, banging his gavel. "After reviewing all the documents and the attorney's reports, I find myself compelled to grant the plaintiff's divorce petition as submitted," he continued. "Best of luck, Mr. Carson, and thank you for your service to the community," he concluded. I glanced at Nick, surprised. "Did we just win?" I queried. He grinned, extending his hand. "Absolutely, Ned. Congratulations, you're now a free man," he affirmed, shaking my hand. Kirsten gathered her belongings and approached us. "Congratulations, Ned," she offered, shaking my hand. "You've exacted your revenge. I hope you find solace in that." I reciprocated the handshake, understanding that losing such a case would be difficult for her. "No, I'm not content," I confessed. "Happiness has eluded me for quite some time." I retrieved a DVD from my briefcase and handed it to her. "You once mentioned that if I needed to convey a message to Nikki, I should inform you. Here's my final message to her. Feel free to view it, I'm indifferent. Additionally, I have a cashier's check for her share of our account. I closed it late last night. I'll make sure she receives it," Kirsten murmured. "By the way, what's on the DVD?" she inquired. "Nothing extraordinary," I replied. "Just a brief message for her." In reality, it was more than a mere message. The previous day, I dragged a 50-gallon drum to the backyard and set up the camera on a tripod. While it recorded, I filled the barrel with all her abandoned belongings, including her $2,500 wedding gown, every photograph I possessed of her, and various trinkets she had collected over the years. I even shattered the wedding portrait hanging above our bedroom and stuffed it into the drum. I poured lighter fluid over everything in the drum and ignited it. As it burned, I addressed the camera. "Nikki," I began, "there was a time when I would have taken a bullet for you. Throughout our time together, I loved you wholeheartedly and I envisioned growing old by your side. Sadly, you had different plans, so that future won't materialize. I've seen glimpses of your work online, and I can't shake the feeling that this is what you intended for me. But that won't happen either. Don't inquire about friendship, as friends don't inflict the pain you did. And don't expect forgiveness from me, for it won't come. I only hope you wake up to reality before it's too late. Farewell, Nikki," I concluded before departing, leaving the camera to capture the final destruction of her remaining possessions. In the house, life moved forward. After Nikki, I revamped the house, removing anything even remotely associated with my ex-wife. I continued sessions with Rose and maintained my thrice-weekly gym routine, adhering to our diet plan and discarding my cigarettes. A couple of months later, I stepped on the scale and found I was down to 84 kilograms. There was still work to do, but I felt better than I had in ages. The only thing missing was the companionship I once shared with Nikki. And then, fate intervened. While shopping for groceries at the local market, I accidentally collided with her. It was a genuine mistake. I wasn't paying attention. After profusely apologizing, I was met with the most enchanting smile. I was momentarily captivated, forgetting to breathe for a moment. Introducing myself, I noticed the absence of any rings on her fingers. Accepting my apology, she introduced herself as Brenda Wilkins. We struck up a conversation, and to my surprise, I mustered the courage to invite her to dinner. Even more surprising was her acceptance. As fate would have it, Brenda was a widowed physician. Her husband and young son had tragically perished in a car accident several years prior, on their way back from a father-son camping trip. Offering my condolences, I shared with her the story of my divorce from Nikki. Amidst our conversation, I mentioned my diabetes and the effects of my medications. Understandingly, she nodded. "I've dealt with similar cases before," she remarked. "Why don't you bring your medications to my office, and let's explore what options we have." Making an appointment, I brought along all my prescriptions. Brenda was taken aback by the sight of them. After conducting some tests, she proposed a few adjustments, and I noticed an immediate improvement. She emphasized the importance of diet, exercise, and quitting smoking, which significantly contributed to my progress. The first time we shared a bed, I felt like a changed man. It was the first time in over 2 years that I felt content. Waking up to Brenda's beautiful face the next morning, I realized I couldn't let go of this newfound happiness. Upon proposing, she showered me with kisses. Following our marriage, we sold our respective homes, combined our finances, and purchased a new residence in a freshly developed area. We both agreed that starting afresh was essential to leave the past behind. A little over a year into our marriage, Brenda gave birth to twins, a boy named Christopher and a girl named Julie. Life carried on for the Carson family, and I discovered the profound joy of fatherhood. About a decade after our marriage, there came a knock at our door. Opening it, I found Kirsten standing there, looking worn out. "Ned, good to see you again," she greeted. "Likewise, Kirsten," I responded, inviting her inside. After settling in, I introduced her to Brenda and the kids. "What brings you here?" I inquired. "This is about Nikki," she revealed. "You were right about Ramon." "About what?" I probed, curious. "It took some time, but he eventually exploited her, just as you predicted," she explained. She confessed to us that she ended up on the streets, performing tricks to support her medication habit. Sadly, women like her don't last long in that environment. She managed on her own for a while, but eventually became destitute. Recently, she was discovered unconscious in an alley and taken to a rehab center. I learned of this a few months ago and arranged for her to come here. She's battling cancer, and her prognosis is grim. "You once vowed not to let her reach this point," I remarked. "What happened?" "We lost contact about 6 years ago," she admitted. "The authorities in Los Angeles reached out to me and I flew out to see her. She's not doing well." "I'm sorry to hear that," I expressed. "What do you need from me?" "She wants closure," Kirsten elaborated, referring to Nikki. "She wishes to see you one last time. I understand your feelings toward her and me, but I implore you to find the compassion to grant her this final wish." It was an unexpected request. Kirsten was asking for a favor. Glancing at Brenda, I saw the concern mirrored in her expression. "What do you think?" I asked her. "Kirsten is right, dear," she affirmed. "She needs closure, and deep down, you know it too." "How severe is her cancer?" Brenda asked Kirsten. "It's dire," Kirsten responded. "The cancer has spread extensively throughout her body. The doctors mentioned that if they had detected it earlier, they might have had a chance, but now it's too advanced. They've given her a prognosis of a few months, or possibly just hours." "All right," I acknowledged. "I'll go see her." "I'll accompany you," Brenda offered. I agreed and contacted a babysitter. Fortunately, Carla, our neighbor's teenager, was available. Once Carla arrived, Brenda and I followed Kirsten to the hospice. Upon reaching the hospice, Kirsten led us to Nikki's room. I was taken aback upon entering. She was unrecognizable, tubes protruded from her frail body, and her once beautiful face appeared sallow and discolored. It seemed as though all her former radiance had vanished. As I stood by her bedside, she opened her eyes. "Ned," she whispered, a tear trickling down her cheek. "Is it really you? You look so good." "Yes, Nikki, it's me," I confirmed. "Oh, Ned, I'm so sorry," she choked out between sobs. "I messed up so badly, ruined everything. I know you said you'd never forgive me, but please, I'm begging you. It hurts so much." Please forgive me. Glancing at Brenda, I saw tears welling in her eyes. I knew what I needed to do, though it would be incredibly difficult. Taking a seat, I clasped Nikki's hand. It felt cold. It's all right, Nikki, I reassured her. I forgive you. She burst into tears, gripping my shirt with her other hand. I embraced her, allowing her to weep on my shoulder. Moments later, a nurse entered, checked her chart, and administered something into her fourth. This will help her rest, she explained before leaving. Seeing Nikki drift off to sleep, I gently adjusted her head on the pillow. Thank you for coming, Kirsten expressed. You're welcome, I replied, nodding. How long will you stay? I'll stay until the end, she murmured. I've arranged to work remotely. There won't be a memorial service, it's what she wanted. What happened to Ramon? I inquired. Kirsten retrieved a folded newspaper clipping from her purse. After he threw her out, he replaced her with another girl, she recounted. Her husband didn't take it well, and ended up eliminating him brutally. I skimmed through the article. It says disfigured, I noted to Kirsten. Yes, she confirmed. Wow, I murmured. And they're certain her husband was responsible? I inquired. Yes, she affirmed. Witnesses saw him leaving the warehouse. He was acquitted by reason of temporary insanity, she explained. I can see why, I remarked. I felt the same urge myself. I'm sorry, Ned, she expressed, for everything. Yes, I responded softly. In any case, we both felt a sense of remorse after watching that video you gave me, she continued. I never truly considered extramarital affairs until I saw it. Prior to that, it was merely about my own gratification. But after viewing it, my perspective changed. I never comprehended the depth of pain from betrayal or its high cost, she added, casting a glance at Nikki. Thanks to you, I'm not the same woman I was a decade ago. I'm pleased to hear that, Kirsten, I acknowledged. Take care of yourself. You too, Ned, she said, embracing me. And look after my ex-brother-in-law, she addressed Brenda, hugging her. You can count on it, Brenda assured her, returning the hug. We exited and made our way back to the car. Are you all right? Brenda inquired as we fastened our seatbelts. Yes, I'm fine, I assured her, starting the car. Karma, I contemplated, could become quite unbearable as I drove.
Story 4.
GPS tracker caught cheating ex at affair partner's house, appeared miserable weeks after breakup. My ex and I used to live in an upscale part of SoCal that has its fair share of wannabe Real Housewives or even Stepford wives. I generally avoided the type. However, my ex met some women through a charity auction, and she started spending a lot of time with them. I couldn't stand them due to their greed and vanity, but I tried to play the role of dutiful husband. To make her happy, I started integrating myself into the group of husbands married to these trollops. I found 2 or 3 of them were guys with whom I had something in common, and we would have fun telling stories about our younger days over a cocktail or at a barbecue. We ended up going on a number of trips to Europe, Hawaii, and Mexico with some of these couples before COVID. Sometimes we would stay local and rent out a block of rooms at a beach hotel for an easy staycation. Once some of the restrictions were lifted during COVID, we immediately booked a block of rooms at this hotel and celebrated our freedom. We had such a great time that we promised each other we'd go back annually to revisit that memory, which we did twice more. 2 years ago, my ex had a midlife crisis and decided to buy a classic car that she'd always wanted growing up. It barely ran, but she joined a car club where the car owners would meet on Saturday mornings for coffee. Then they would drive their cars in a parade to a different location. Since I'm not a car guy and didn't want to spend my weekends talking to mechanics and figuring out how to keep an old car running, I told her it was a hobby we weren't going to share. I knew it was just going to be a money pit that made no sense to me, especially since our kids were about to head off to college. But I didn't draw a line in the sand as it was her dream car, so I supported the dream. Unfortunately, she went ahead and bought the car, then started plowing thousands of dollars into upgrades and maintenance to keep it running. I saw the bills and paid them, but she told me she was getting great deals on parts and labor due to referrals from her car club, especially one guy, we'll call him Carlos, that she said adopted her into the club. After a few months of car club weekends, I realized she was arriving home later and later on Saturdays. Her phone behavior also changed. Up until that point, we had an open phone policy, but one day I tried to take a call on her phone, only to find she had changed her password. Her excuse was that one of the wives was having problems with her husband, and my ex was providing confidential advice that she didn't want me seeing in case I talked to him. Her behavior also changed. She became irritable with everything I did and would passive-aggressively compare me to other husbands, especially those who were having better financial years than myself. as their businesses were less impacted by COVID than mine. We had been through down cycles in our relationship before. We had both cheated early in our marriage, but through counseling had worked through it and forgiven each other 20 years prior. But the combination of red flags was next level. I decided to start snooping. The next Friday night, I planted a GPS tracker on her car. The next morning, after she left for the car club, I logged into our family plan and started looking at her phone and text activity. Lo and behold, there was a new phone number that was spiking in activity. I paid for a name lookup service and found Carlos's full name and home address. I had some lunch, then watched the GPS on her car drive to Carlos's house, where she spent the afternoon effing her new boyfriend. I debated confronting her when she got home, but instead I played sick and moved into a different bedroom, noting that I didn't want to infect her with my virus. She shrugged and didn't say a word, which spoke volumes. I started separating money and went full gray rock for the next few months, opting to wait for our last child to leave the nest for college. She did come into my room a few times for sex. For some reason, I decided I was only going to have anal with her thereafter because it wasn't her favorite, but she would usually orgasm more intensely from the experience. So she never complained. Aftercare was always awkward, as she would usually just get up and head back to her room, probably enjoying the thrill of having come in various orifices from both her husband and her boyfriend. Once our last child was settled into his dorm at college, I sat her down and told her I knew she had a boyfriend and that I would be filing for divorce. She was in shock and denied it, but I gave her Carlos's address and the GPS log of time spent at that location, and her face went pale. She stammered and explained that she would park at his house and they would walk to a coffee shop a mile away for exercise. I told her to stop making excuses and just own up to it, but instead she decided to blame me. She turned the tables and said that if she did cheat, she had good reason because I wasn't as good a provider as the other husbands in the group. She added that if we divorced, all the women in the group would force their husbands to ghost me, leaving me friendless. I called her bluff, believing that some of the guys actually had balls and would be there for me. Later that day, I moved out, and the following week I filed for divorce. I settled into my new apartment and reached out to a couple of the guys in the group that I was close to. They were initially sympathetic, but as she predicted, within 2 weeks, I had been completely shut out of my friend group, as the men lived in fear of their wives. She bought me out of the house and we settled the divorce relatively quickly. We managed to spend Christmas together with our kids that first year. I stopped following social media of my former friends as they were dead to me and decided to start rebuilding my life from scratch. I started an exercise and diet routine that transformed me back into my college body, while I reconnected with old friends and started making new ones. I've dated a few nice ladies and had some memorable one-night stands, but haven't yet met anyone I'm going to settle down with anytime soon. We split the kids over the holidays this year, and it went smoothly. My oldest son came home from college over Easter break to visit his girlfriend. He spent Easter with my ex. It isn't a big holiday for me, and the next day he told me that my ex had introduced her new boyfriend to him, and amazingly enough, it was Carlos. I assumed she had been sneaking around with him due to her wanting to maintain appearances of not being a cheater, but I guess she decided that a year was enough to make it official. I wasn't surprised, but curiosity got the best of me last night. I realized our annual staycation at the beach was this past week. So I logged onto social media and found a picture wall from one of the women who hadn't blocked me. Sure enough, the entire group of couples was at the hotel, and my ex and Carlos were featured in the middle, with her showing off her new engagement ring in the photos. I've done a lot of work over the past 2 years processing the end of my relationship, but I have to admit, seeing him living my life with my ex and my friends was a punch in the gut. Not a knockout blow, mind you, but enough of a trigger to let me know I still have a little work left before I've healed completely. Kudos to her for finally finding a use for that classic car other than draining my wallet. Apparently it was great for driving straight into Carlos's arms. And isn't it charming how your supposed friends folded like cheap lawn chairs at the first sign of marital discord? Clearly, the only thing they lacked more than loyalty was a backbone. Your approach to her infidelity was masterful, though. Moving into a different bedroom, and bonus points for making her experience some discomfort with the non-preferred type of intimacy. Sometimes poetic justice comes in the most unexpected forms. Yeah, it stings seeing her with an engagement ring on your old buddy, but remember, you dodged a bullet. Update: ex-wife cheated 2 years ago, still denies his existence. So, I posted my story about how my ex-wife met a guy through a car club while we were married. She proceeded to have a full affair with him. I figured it out using phone records and GPS in her car and realized she was hiding his existence entirely from me. I waited a few months until the day after we dropped our last child off at college, then confronted her. She denied it, and I moved out and got divorced. He's younger, so I know she's since been losing weight via OIC and posting about her wellness journey. Since I moved out, I've largely been no contact except for divorce and discussions regarding our children. One of our kids had a graduation last week, and we had to attend the same ceremony and celebrations. I vowed to be kind and gray rock her while outwardly proposing to be the happy former couple who get along. For some reason, we ended up sitting next to each other during the walkthrough ceremony and had an hour to kill before the activity started. She started asking personal questions about my life, which I largely evaded. It's important to note that over Easter break, she introduced her affair partner to our children. They told me about him and asked if I knew about him, which I answered yes without providing more information to them. Since we had time to kill, I asked if my ex was happy with her boyfriend. She immediately went into a long denial about the relationship and said he was just a friend. I laughed and pointed out that she had been dating him for more than 2 years at this point, and if I were him, I would be pissed at not being called a boyfriend. She started getting emotional, choked up, and said she had a lot of regrets about the choices she made and doesn't like how life turned out. I asked her to be specific about what choices she regretted making, but she went quiet. I ended the conversation feeling pity for her. She's been living a lie for so long that she literally has no concept of the truth of our demise, nor will she take any responsibility for her role in the same. I drove home feeling like a winner for the first time in this whole situation. It gets better. Now let's see what the community thinks. First up, tell your kids about her affair. They're old enough now. If I were in your shoes, I would just tell them, I need to be honest with you. This was the reason for the divorce. And I'm telling you only now because I didn't want you to be negatively affected while you were still living at home. She is still your mother, and I'm still your father, but she is no longer the woman I fell in love with and married. I will always love you, and you will always be my top priority in life, but I have to set the record clear in order to move on with my life. Let them decide how to move things forward with your ex. This is good. We're doing some time together on a trip in 3 weeks. Good time to drop that bomb on them. Someone else chimes in, soon, she will actually regret her actions and try to come back. Stay strong and let her deal with her own messed up life. Another person adds, a classic case where the cheater finds out the grass isn't greener on the other side of the fence. Her response to questions about her relationship with the affair partner is code for, the new wore off, and he's not what I thought he was. And you know what? Tough crap. She deserves every bit of humiliation and disappointment that comes her way. She threw away a marriage over a stupid fantasy, and now she regrets it because reality set in. Too bad. Do not, under any circumstances, take her back. After the relationship ends up in the toilet, she chose this sleazeball over you, she can deal with it. So, she's still denying Carlos's existence after 2 years? That's dedication to delusion. Her getting choked up and admitting to regrets without specifics? That's the emotional equivalent of a choose-your-own-adventure book where every ending sucks. She regrets her choices? Yeah, she regrets choosing someone whose spark plugs aren't firing as well as she thought. Too bad. So sad. Telling your kids the real reason for the divorce is a solid plan. They're old enough to handle the truth, and it's high time someone gave them the uncensored director's cut of this drama. So yes, it does get better because while she's stuck rewriting history and regretting her very public poor decisions, you're cruising down the road to a happier, Carlos-free future. Enjoy the ride. What do you make of this? Thank you for joining us today.
Story 3.
Once, I was blissfully unaware and content because I thought my marriage was strong. However, reality shattered my illusions when I discovered that my wife, Dunya, was unfaithful and deceptive. I'm John Miller, but my friends call me Jay. I'm dedicated to physical training, spending 5 days a week at the gym, standing at 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing 192 pounds. I prioritize self-care. 8 years ago, I made a bold choice to leave the corporate world and start my own successful company. Meanwhile, Danya continues to work for a well-known company, one of the 50 largest. She has dedicated an impressive 24 years to the same company, starting as an OT analyst a month after our wedding. About 5 years ago, she transitioned to a training unit instructor to keep up with evolving technology. Her job requires attending at least 20 days of educational programs annually. At 46, Donya looks stunning at 5 feet 8 inches tall and 118 pounds. She doesn't fit the expectations for a mother of two. Each morning, she joins 6 other women from our neighborhood for a challenging 6-mile run at dawn. Now, our 22-year-old daughter, Emily, proudly graduates from Florida State University. Following her mother's path, she became a dedicated first-grade teacher in Naples. Running is a family activity, with Emily joining her mother's running group at 14. I'm delighted she appreciates the beer I brew, my hobby, and even joined a beer club in Naples, which I happily attend with her whenever possible. Our 21-year-old son, Kent, is a recent graduate of the University of Florida, passionate about continuing his education. Although he aspires to work in my business, I've made it clear he must gain 5 years of corporate America experience first. I believe real-world experience is crucial for his growth. Danya, my wife, dislikes beer and finds its aroma unpleasant in our home. I strategically plan my beer brewing during her trips, like her current one to Dallas, giving me the perfect opportunity to craft a refined English brown ale. Life seemed to have peaked, but little did I know significant changes were on the horizon. Last Wednesday at 8:30 p.m., Bobby, a member of my beer club, asked if I could pick him up from the airport. Without hesitation, I agreed. While waiting at the baggage claim, I noticed 3 people who turned out to be colleagues of Danya's. Curiosity led me to wonder why Danya wasn't among them. I called her on the service line, an unusual move as I usually contact her on her personal mobile phone. When I called Danya's office, her answering machine informed me that she would be out of the Dallas office until Wednesday, teaching classes. She mentioned that she wouldn't be home on Thursday and Friday, and instructed to leave a message, with a promise to return calls on Monday. Approaching Bobby, I explained my confusion, and he suggested I talk to Steve, a fellow member of our beer club and a detective in the local police. Deciding to address the situation, I called Danya. During our conversation, I conveyed a desire to hear her voice. In response, she expressed anticipation for the moment when she could hug me. She mentioned that her Friday flight should depart early, and she was looking forward to falling asleep in my loving arms. I asked if she could come, and she replied affirmatively, stating that she had to stay and fulfill her duties. She emphasized that it would be unfair to neglect them and reassured me of her love, mentioning that she would see me on Friday. The revelation that this was the first time Danya had cheated on me was unsettling. Despite the late hour, I contacted Steve for a beer, and we discussed our upcoming meeting. I confided in Steve about my suspicion, and he sympathetically offered his help. I believe Danya is cheating because, meeting Bobby at the airport, I saw 3 of Danya's colleagues leaving with luggage, suggesting they spent the week with her. Despite her voicemail saying she'd be in Dallas until Wednesday and on vacation until Monday, she told me she'd teach classes until Friday. Steve listened patiently and suggested I reach out to Frank Jones, who held a high position and might have more information. I expressed gratitude to Steve and mentioned my plan to contact Frank the following morning. As the sun rose on a new day, Frank Jones unexpectedly appeared, prompted by Steve. After recounting my story, I faced Frank's inquiries. After a brief pause, Frank posed a thought-provoking question. Had I been happily married for over 24 years, and was I truly ready to reveal the truth? Intrigued, I inquired about the reasons behind such a question. Frank cautiously replied that, based on his experience, most marriages in such situations ended in divorce. He presented a series of questions for me to consider. How much information did I really want to obtain? How far into the past should we delve? What was my budget for the investigation? Was I prepared to work with the information we discovered? Shocked, I sat in silence before finally expressing, "Frank, I need to know every last detail. When, where, and with whom, please. As far-reaching as possible. I'm willing to lay out whatever it takes to find out the truth. If I have been deceived, I want to understand to what extent." In response, we decided that Frank should contact his reliable colleague, a private detective from Dallas, who could assist in studying Danya's background. Additionally, one of his team members would review the training schedule. I was instructed to reach out to 3 teachers I saw on the way from the airport. While awaiting their responses, I meticulously checked the house for any clues. Uncertain about what to look for and where to start, I excluded the living room, dining room, kitchen, Emily and Kent's room from the search. Choosing to begin with Danya's dresser, I found nothing unusual among its contents. Although everything seemed familiar, upon opening the closet and observing numerous boxes, I decided to shift my attention to the bathroom. Unfortunately, no hidden information from Doña was found in the bathroom. Returning to her closet, I remained determined to find some clue. Starting with hanging clothes and meticulously going through shoe boxes, I searched for anything strange or suspicious. Despite thoroughly searching our bedroom, the guest bedroom, the study, the garage, and the attic, I still couldn't comprehend anything or gain insight into the situation. Around 5 p.m., Frank finally arrived and swiftly set up surveillance cameras in all bedrooms, the office, and the kitchen. Additionally, he installed a voice recorder. After taking all security measures, we went to the airport, where we eventually located Donya's car. The trunk had a GPS system, and a voice recorder was discreetly placed under the front seat. Frank and I had light ale at the house, and he briefed me. Dawn's class schedule varied in duration, from 3 to 5 days, depending on the location. For instance, classes in Dallas lasted 3 days, starting on Monday and ending on Wednesday. Tom, Paul, and Bev flew out on Sunday afternoon and returned on Wednesday evening. Teaching materials were delivered to the specified location a week before the scheduled class, but teachers weren't responsible for their placement and transportation. Each location had designated employees for those tasks. As I sat there, trying to control my anger, I thought of my father, who always stressed the importance of keeping anger in check for clear thinking. Annoyed, I stormed into the kitchen, expressing my frustration. She had been lying to me all along. There should be consequences for this. Turning to Frank, I asked if he found anything during my search. Unfortunately, I replied that I found nothing suspicious. The only thing we noticed was that Donna frequently washed her clothes. After discussing the issue, we decided that Frank would intercept her bag at the airport, and I would find a way to turn off the washing machine to delay her from starting laundry immediately. Before leaving, Frank mentioned his contact in Dallas being at Donna's hotel and planning to talk to him in the morning before calling me. After Frank left, I realized I couldn't sleep in our bedroom and opted for Kent's bed. Needless to say, I slept very little. Trying to maintain my daily routine, I went to the office. We arranged to meet at my house later that day. Frank arrived at 2 o'clock, carrying a stack of documents. The report from our Dallas employee arrived via email with attached photos. Frank showed me a picture of 6 people gathered at a restaurant table, 3 women and 3 men, sitting in pairs. Curiously, Frank asked if I recognized any of these people. I stared at the photo before responding, "The only one I can identify is Dawn." To get a better look, he handed me individual photos of each person. I studied their faces again in silence, taking a few minutes to scrutinize the details. Handing Frank one of the photos, I mentioned the person seemed strangely familiar, but I couldn't recall where I had seen him before. While having our meal, Frank shared intriguing information. Video cameras were installed on all hotel floors, facing the corridors. We began examining the next set of pictures, showing our group leaving the restaurant, entering the elevator, and eventually disembarking on the 7th floor. Interestingly, the women went to room 707, and the men went to room 709. On Friday morning at 10:29, photos depicted 2 men leaving room 709. Subsequent images captured them exiting the elevator, walking down the hall, and leaving through the front door. These pictures conveyed a sense of a friendly or professional relationship rather than a romantic one. According to Frank, they went to a nearby restaurant for lunch, each covering their own bill. Later, additional photos at the hotel showed them carrying luggage from the room to the elevator, and then each went to the reception desk to complete the checkout process. With a serious expression, Frank turned to me and asked if I was absolutely sure about revealing all the details. Without hesitation, I confidently affirmed my decision. Frank hesitated for a moment, maintaining unwavering eye contact, and then continued. Meanwhile, I received another folder with information about the situation. I won't delve into the conversation details, but I learned that agents from Dallas entered rooms 707 and 709, meticulously recording every step alongside the cleaners. It was revealed that rooms 707 and 709 were connected by an internal door. To gather evidence, sheets were removed and sent to the laboratory for DNA analysis. Additionally, Used glasses were carefully packed for fingerprints, and the garbage underwent thorough examination. According to the agent, there was a strong closeness smell in the rooms, and traces of use and stains were found on all 4 beds. To determine if Danya actively participated or just observed, we must await the results of laboratory tests. Frank and I find it hard to believe otherwise, considering her likely involvement in these actions. It's unpleasant to witness the deceptive and unfaithful behavior of the woman I married. As for our next move, she should be back tonight. We decided to start by turning off the washing machine. We moved it and disconnected one of the wires connected to the motor. I believed Frank assigned me this simple task to give me time to process. Back in the kitchen, Frank suggested taking a DNA sample from me and asked if I could find a comb with the hair of each of the children. Perplexed, I asked why he suspected that the children may not be mine and expressed my confusion. "You wanted full transparency, didn't you?" I mused, before suggesting that we needed to collect a piece of hair before the first haircut, needing only 1 strand for each person. He confirmed that this would be enough. Frank carefully packaged my sample as number 1, Kent's as number 2, Emily's as number 3. We managed to take a strand from Donna's comb, numbered as 4. Tomorrow morning, these samples will be sent to the laboratory. Frank has a contact at the airport who will try to intercept Danya's luggage, delaying her return due to the necessary procedures related to the missing baggage claim. After addressing these issues, our conversation shifted to how I could behave normally around Dunya. Could I warmly greet her at home, hug and kiss her? Could I patiently listen to her made-up stories about the trip? Could I invite her to dinner tomorrow and engage in close activities with her? How long and convincingly could I continue to deceive her? Frank mentioned that his team needed ample time to collect and analyze evidence, warning that it could take several months to realize all the consequences of Danya's actions. Could I stay calm for this extended period? I promised him that I was ready to do whatever it took, because my ultimate goal is to uncover the truth. Frank asked if it was possible for me to go on a 3 or 4 day business trip out of town. Thinking about who I could visit in the shortest possible time without arousing suspicion from Danya, I smiled. Looking up, I said I wanted to visit one of my longtime clients in St. Louis. I planned to inform Donna about my departure on Monday morning, with my return scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I asked Frank why he wanted me to leave, seeking an explanation. Frank clarified that if Danya had any hidden motives, she might avoid suspicious actions while I'm away to prevent arousing doubts. There's a chance she could lower her guard, potentially making a foolish move. I sense she had a great weekend and is eager to resume a relationship with someone. Unfortunately, her office lacks video surveillance, but we wondered if there's something she always carries that we can use to our advantage. Perhaps we could discreetly attach a small bug to it. Any suggestions? After pondering, I suggested her briefcase. Frank admitted it's not a perfect solution, but better than nothing. He'll leave a bug with me, and in the evening, I can attach it to her briefcase. It's time for him to go. Am I ready for the show? I replied with a simple yes. As Frank was about to leave, he mentioned that if I had the chance tonight or tomorrow morning, I should check for liquid stains on Danya's underwear. Good night. If you get a chance this weekend, call me. And remember, stay calm. I settled on the back terrace with a porter in hand, letting my thoughts wander. Apart from Donna planning to do laundry early Saturday morning, nothing made me doubt her intentions. Just before dawn, my morning was interrupted by a phone call from Frank. He informed me that Dana's luggage reached the laboratory successfully. He emphasized the need to remain calm. At dawn, her typical travel fatigue mixed with disappointment over the airline mishandling her belongings. She was unhappy, especially missing 2 recently bought pairs of trousers. But she said everything else could be replaced and essentials were safe in her carry-on luggage. Seeking solace, she hugged me, expressing love and joy at returning home. She shared her longing for my presence during her absence. After a gentle hug and kiss, she headed upstairs for a relaxing bath. Meanwhile, I discreetly attached a bug to her briefcase and sat down in front of the TV, thinking about those cherished moments we shared. Recalling Dunya's arrival, I couldn't shake the feeling of immense love from her. Despite travel fatigue and mild luggage dissatisfaction, she was thrilled to be home. Comparing my efforts to her impeccable work, I realized I needed to improve and match her level. It became clear that I needed to improve and hone my abilities so that she would not see that I was behind the facade. I decided to fix the situation, put aside all doubts, and climbed the stairs, preparing for bed where we'd find solace in each other's arms. I think Doña overslept Saturday morning, as she didn't have any worries with the laundry. Before taking a shower, I involuntarily began to examine Doña's underwear and a basket of dirty laundry, feeling uneasy, as if I had invaded her personal life. I didn't expect to closely inspect the close area of her underwear. Though not an expert, I found nothing unusual. After a bath, I went downstairs, made coffee, fetched the newspaper, and waited patiently for Dawn. When I was pouring my third cup of coffee, she came into the kitchen with a calm expression on her face, wrapped in a bathrobe and smiling. I greeted her with a cheerful, "Good morning, sleepyhead." Seeing her well-rested, I remarked that it looked like she was ready to conquer the day. I offered a cup of coffee, to which she gratefully smiled and expressed her desire for one. I jokingly mentioned that I should make luggage mistakes more often if it leads to such delightful vacations. After our shared breakfast, I went outside to attend to my own tasks. A few hours later, she mentioned her plan to go to the grocery store and kindly asked if I needed anything. Politely declining, I said, "No thanks." While she was out, I planned to organize and transfer a batch of English brown ale from the primary to the secondary. During dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant, we had a lively conversation, sharing our impressions of the past week and discussing upcoming plans. I spoke about my recent trip to St. Louis, and she expressed happiness at being home after exhausting travels. She mentioned if her luggage was still missing by Wednesday, she'd go shopping for replacements after work. To my relief, she hoped no one would find out about it, except for those trousers she's worn for ages. I grinned and continued to share with her the details of my latest batch of English brown ale. In the end, we decided to wrap it up, and I made 2 cases of my homemade beer before heading to St. Louis. I know the journey takes more than 8 hours, but what can I say? I sincerely love to drive, as it allows me to be alone and reflect. Usually, my thoughts revolve around my business, but on this trip, I was thinking only about Dawn. On the way, I dialed Frank's number and told him about my weekend. Although he had no new information, he said he would keep in touch. Lost in thought, I was surprised to realize that 4 hours had already passed. I dialed Frank's number again, deciding to get down to business. I asked him to tell me honestly what his intuition says. Taking a pause to collect his thoughts, Frank replied that he discussed this issue with Joe in Dallas, and they were sure that Doña had been having numerous affairs for a long time. We proceed from the fact that it is impossible to simply observe many hours of close meetings without active participation. In addition, their undeniable closeness to each other further reinforces our suspicions. They showed no signs of fuss or nervousness, did not hold on to each other, but went into different rooms without attracting attention. People have been developing such confidence in their actions for years. I feel intuitively that you may be unhappy with our conclusions regarding this group, which includes your wife. According to Frank, our man reported that these 6 people discussed classes, their families, and showed amazing ease in communicating with each other. It is noteworthy that they bore their own expenses, deliberately avoided sitting next to the same person during meals, and communicated with each member of the group. It is safe to say that this group has maintained its connection for a long time. They maintained a friendly atmosphere in the hotel rooms, but once inside, they threw stormy parties. Frank's last words to me were about the need to make a decision regarding Donna and the other members of that group. After that, I contacted my lawyer, Michael Davidson, the best divorce lawyer in the state. After giving him a brief information, he convinced me that Dave Ford would definitely contact me. After settling into a hotel room, I called Tanya to inform her of my safe arrival in St. Louis. Then I contacted Fred to confirm our planned golf game. At about 9:30 p.m., Frank called to see how I was doing. I told him that I had already given his name to my lawyer and that Mike would contact Dave Ford on my behalf. Frank found it funny and mentioned that Dave Ford's reputation alone could intimidate any lawyer Danya approached. I'm tired, and I really want this situation to end. If they want to play violent games, then I am ready to show my skills. On Tuesday, I spent the whole day with Fred on the golf course. Around 1 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, Frank called me and asked about my schedule. I told him that I was free until the end of the day, and planned to go home on Thursday morning at about 2 p.m. Dave Ford contacted me, and I informed him about the current situation. I felt relieved when he gave his approval of my success. He highly praised Frank's company, considering it among the best. After learning my plans, Dave inquired about my desires. If Dawn proves unfaithful, I'll seek a divorce. However, to fully grasp my disappointment in Dawn and her partners, I must wait for Frank's team's investigation to conclude. I suggest starting the divorce process, citing infidelity as the basis. Our conversation shifted to gathering evidence during the upcoming class and discussing my ability to maintain the appearance of a normal life for several months. Dave informed me about the possibility of a quick, no-fault divorce in Georgia. Accusing her of infidelity would be more profitable, especially with our children being adults. After further discussion, I realized I needed to carefully consider my approach to divorce. On Wednesday evening at 9 o'clock, there was a sudden knock on my door. To my surprise, Steve and Frank were standing there. I asked about their unexpected visit, and Frank replied with unpleasant news he wanted to share personally. Steve didn't know the purpose, but Frank thought it would be good for me to have a friend at this conversation. It's up to you whether Steve stays to hear the news. Despite the seriousness, I wanted Steve to stay. Seated, I met Frank's eyes. He revealed that test results confirmed Donna's active participation. Shockingly, traces of all 6 individuals' activities were found on one bed, even though each woman had her own bed. Our evidence strongly proves that every woman had close relations with all 3 men on their beds. Identifying Danya was possible with the DNA sample taken from our house's hair. Jay, I'm sorry for how things turned out. I was stunned, trying to grasp the depth of the situation. Time seemed to have stopped, and I sat in silence, closing my eyes to regain calm and suppress the growing rage. Finally, I plucked up the courage and opened my eyes to utter words of disbelief, doubting anything could be more terrible than finding out my wife was involved with 5 other people. Frank, with a slight cough, revealed the unthinkable truth. 2 of these men turned out to be the biological fathers of our children, Kent and Emily. I wasn't there. Father. This news hit me like a ton of bricks, and in an instant, I jumped up, shouting for an explanation. How can this be? My children weren't mine. I will have a certain benefit from this opportunity, as I will be the one to use it. This woman has been in an extramarital relationship for more than 24 years, deceiving and manipulating me. They sat in silence, watching me walk up and down the room in agitation. My thoughts were racing, trying to figure out the news I had just learned. My once perfect world was crumbling before my eyes. How do I navigate this situation now? It was impossible to imagine that neither Kent nor Emily were my biological children, not to mention that my wife had a long-term love affair with one of the partners throughout our marriage. Frank accurately assessed the current difficult situation. It was clear that the consequences of this would be severe. I planned to show my ability to play hard. Steve and Frank watched as my emotions gradually changed from shock, disbelief, and confusion to sadness, loneliness, loss, anger, rage, and finally, determination. Time seemed to freeze. I walked back and forth, not realizing how much time had passed. It became clear that Frank and Steve came to me in St. Louis not only to provide support, but also to prevent impulsive acts. When I regained my composure and pulled myself together, their purpose became clear. During the conversation, we discussed my position and plans. I made it clear that she must answer for her actions. Despite the lack of sleep, their presence provided much-needed support, as I doubted I could drive a car without them. Having received the necessary evidence, we carefully selected the most effective measures to influence them. A divorce from Donya would have been a loud and humiliating affair for her, although I admit I would have to experience embarrassment as well. Over time, the truth that Emily and Kent had different fathers would become widely known, exposing my wife's unfaithful nature. In the state of Georgia, both parties have the option to file for a no-fault divorce, which means filing, waiting for 30 days, getting a divorce, and dividing the property. In the case of filing for divorce based on infidelity, the process becomes much longer, taking months to set the court session date and provide evidence. Despite my strong desire to bring Dawn to court for her infidelity and force her through all the court proceedings, my friends Steve, Frank, and Dave convinced me of the need for a no-fault divorce. They said it would be faster and more economical, and at the same time, I would be able to embarrass Dawn and her partners. Now all I had to do was decide when to proceed with the divorce. In Atlanta, Steve, Frank, Dave, and I gathered in Frank's conference room to discuss what we know, what information we still need to get, what methods to get it, and what actions need to be taken to bring them to justice. Curiously, I asked Frank if Dawn had been involved in any suspicious activities while I was away in St. Louis. Frank replied that Dawn had done nothing wrong and had not conducted any inappropriate phone conversations. Continuing the conversation, Frank said that we were able to trace all the actions of a group of 6 people over the past 5 years. Interestingly, 2 members of the group constantly booked adjacent rooms, although they were not always the same people. Although most often, all 6 people were present in the room. There were cases when the composition of the group changed. At times, 1 woman appeared next to 3 men, forming a group of at least 4 people. I did not expect such a development of events, and therefore I began to show my despair by damaging the table with force and sharply calling it cheating. I demanded that Frank thoroughly investigate the gang of 6 people, including Dawn, and find out all the details. It became clear that my knowledge of the situation is limited. I wanted to discover their marital status, the duration of their parental relationships, and whether the children of these women were fathered by their husbands. Additionally, I needed information on whether they all worked in the same organization, their places of residence, and other details that could be uncovered. With Donya's schedule in hand, Frank obtained information about upcoming classes and their locations. This allowed Frank to establish contact and develop a detailed plan, including installing cameras and bugs in hotel rooms. Frank understood that evidence collected this way couldn't be used in court, but his goal was to achieve a guilt-free divorce, requiring crucial information. An interesting detail in Dana's calendar was that she had exactly 3 classes scheduled before our upcoming 25th wedding anniversary celebration. Notably, the 25th anniversary fell on a Sunday, and Donya's last class in Orlando ended on Friday. Observing this group, I firmly decided that our anniversary would mark the end of our communication. I chose not to participate in any celebrations with her, as her gift would not be appreciated. At that moment, I would cease being a deceived spouse, and she would begin facing the consequences of her deceitful actions that persisted for over 24 years. In that moment, I would turn my suffering into her worst nightmare. Donya would deeply regret the day our paths crossed because I considered her guilty of numerous lies endured throughout our marriage. A week passed, and we gathered in Dave's conference room, eagerly awaiting news from Frank. As I settled in, I couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey we all experienced together. The group, known as the Gang of 6, included George C. Thomas from Richmond, Virginia, Henry S. King from Little Rock, Arkansas, Charles K. Nixon from Columbia, South Carolina, Joyce D. Hopkins from Miami, Florida, Catherine G. Williams from Knoxville, Tennessee, and of course, Dawn. Fate brought them together over 24 years ago during a training program for new employees of the same organization. When the Wednesday of Donya's last class arrived, Frank, Steve, Dave, and I gathered around the conference table, ready to hear the latest news. Last week in Washington, Donya and Henry occupied adjoining rooms, while the other 4 members of the group were scattered on different floors of the hotel. It was discovered that Donna and Henry, in adjacent rooms, slept in the same room at the same time. No woman entered or left the man's room, and there was never a simultaneous exit from adjacent rooms during the whole day and early evening. They spent a lot of time together, but after 10 o'clock in the evening, they gradually dispersed to their rooms. Only after 2 o'clock in the morning did they return to their rooms, except for Thursday evening, when all 6 spent the whole night in adjacent rooms. Their conversations and interactions outside the rooms resembled those of professional colleagues. They discussed accommodation, meals, attended games and performances, and shared news about their children's classes. After 24 years of living together, keeping their secrets hidden has become a familiar thing. Once again, Frank's agents discreetly entered the room, posing as a cleaning crew. Fortunately, close contacts occurred only in adjacent rooms, making it easier to collect hair samples and fingerprints from each participant for further analysis. Sheets from each room were carefully collected, along with samples of women's underwear. Thanks to irrefutable DNA evidence, we successfully uncovered the truth. George turned out to be Emily's father, and Chuck was Kent's biological father. Danya faced difficulties associated with unprotected closeness, having many partners, making it impossible to determine the true father of her children. In Richmond, Virginia, George C. Thomas had been married for 24 years with 2 adult children. George and his wife were unaware that they would soon find out about another daughter. Similarly, Henry S. King from Little Rock, Arkansas, had been married for 23 years with twin sons who turned 21. On the other hand, Charles K. Nixon from Columbia, South Carolina, tied the knot with his high school sweetheart and lived in marriage for 25 years, resulting in a son. Chuck is on the verge of revealing the truth that he has another son. In Miami, Florida, Joyce D. Hopkins, happily married, is getting ready to celebrate her 25th wedding anniversary. Joyce is a proud mother of a 23-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter. Meanwhile, Catherine G. Williams from Knoxville, Tennessee, has been married for 23 years and is the mother of 2 daughters and a son. All members of the friendly group called the Gang of 6 have been married for over 23 years and seem content, except for Chuck, who recently discovered the painful reality of his wife's infidelity. We're curious about whether any of these 3 men could be the fathers of Joyce or Catherine's children. It's very likely that at least one of them is the biological father, and their spouses probably want to know the answer too. Frank hopes to find out by next Wednesday, although I'm not sure about his plans. In a brief meeting at Dave's office on Wednesday, Frank informed us that classes in Orlando last only 3 days, which is quite surprising. Can you believe it? Next Thursday and Friday, the group plans to spend time before its anniversary. Bish's complete lack of respect for me is indisputable. Bish will be responsible for the consequences. When I came to my senses a little, Frank reminded me that I am not the only spouse whose children have different biological fathers. Henry is the father of both Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son. Catherine has 2 daughters whose fathers are George and Chuck. Surprisingly, Joyce is the only woman among all who has at least one child whose father is her husband. Henry is the biological father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son, and George is Emily's father. One of Catherine's daughters is also the child of Chuck, who is her biological father. It's all pretty confusing, and I feel like I need a flowchart to keep track of it all. Even though I know my marriage is over and I've gone through all the stages of grief, I find the strength to create the appearance of a loving husband. It's become a kind of game for me. I pretend to be affectionate while secretly planning how to ruin my future ex-wife Doña Melon, who cheated on me. It's pretty funny, considering she's been cheating on me for over 24 years. If she can lie to my face for so long, then I will definitely be able to pretend to be a devoted, caring, albeit forgetful husband. For several months, Frank's team planned to carry out the same procedures in San Diego as in Washington. They were going to scrupulously examine the collected records and evidence, hoping to find all the missing details with unshakable confidence. They expected that everything would happen the same way as in Washington. Personally, I couldn't contain my excitement about the upcoming trip to Orlando and was happy to think about how to turn their life into an absolute nightmare. Unfortunately, Catherine couldn't join us in San Diego, but since classes in Orlando lasted 3 days, all 6 of us agreed that we would attend them. The prospect of spending 2 days without the presence of colleagues, where we could maneuver freely, filled us with joyful anticipation. Doña was clearly neglecting our anniversary when she chose to spend time with her comrades instead of rushing to the one she supposedly loves. She didn't know yet that I had already planned to be their instructor for Wednesday afternoon. In the presence of all the students, I will hold the final hour of classes so that everyone will witness the final exit of the Gang of 6. Dave Ford and his team were well informed and prepared to process the necessary legal documents. He gave me a guarantee that everything necessary would be ready on time. In addition, Frank ordered his staff to be present on the spot and closely monitor the members of the group. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Dave, Frank, Steve, and I have jointly developed a strategy to eliminate their vulnerability after the foundation was laid. My moment finally came when I had to go on stage after Dana's departure. In the 4th update, I took the initiative to establish contacts with the spouses of our close-knit group of 6 people. I shared with them my plan to surprise my wife in Orlando in honor of our 25th wedding anniversary and 25 years of experience in the company. Considering that their spouses came to the company at the same time as mine, I decided that their presence would be pleasant for everyone. As a token of appreciation, I have booked flights that will be waiting for them at the boarding gate. I informed Kent and Emily of the plan to surprise their mother on Wednesday and invited them to meet me in Orlando on Tuesday. In the evening of the same day, I got together with the children and told them all the details. We spent several hours discussing how I found out the truth, the evidence I gathered, my intentions to destroy their mother's world the next day, and most importantly, how much I cherish them. During our heartfelt conversation, I told them that I might not be their biological father, but assured them that I would always be a loving father to them. We hugged tightly, and tears flowed down our faces. They had a lot of questions, and I tried to answer them honestly, without embellishing my answers. I begged them not to tell my mother, and they both promised not to. Looking into their eyes, I said that I would like them to accompany me tomorrow when I would confront their mother and shame her. I acknowledged that this was a very important request and apologized if it confused them. Unfortunately, the fact that they are not my biological children will soon be made public in the Atlanta newspapers, which will undoubtedly lead to shame for all of us. If they decide to come, they will witness my rude attitude towards their mother and her companions. I may say something that will embarrass them, but it is important to know that nothing I say will change my attitude towards them. Since you're already adults, I cannot legally adopt you, although I would gladly do it if I could. But despite this, I want you to know that I sincerely love you both and consider you my children. It is up to you to decide whether you will attend, because in the end, she is your mother. Take your time, think about everything, and make a decision yourself, knowing that I will love you from now on and forever?" Kent asked with tears in his eyes. "Dad, I understand that Mom loves you and you love her. Can you find the strength in your heart to forgive her and move on? Why don't you both go to a psychologist to sort this out?" Looking at my children, I tried to stay calm and keep myself in hand. How can you calmly and rationally answer such incredulous questions? Taking a deep breath, I realized that as children, they naturally want their parents to always be together and constantly be present next to them. So please close your eyes and let me take you on a journey. Imagine that you have met an extraordinary person whom you consider an ideal couple with whom you want to spend the rest of your life. The very thought of being separated from him, even for a moment, becomes unbearable. After a magical honeymoon, you both start building your careers, and over the years, you have 2 wonderful children. Your life revolves around the happiness and well-being of your family. Whether it's football training or cheerleading camps, you dedicate your time to supporting your loved ones in their pursuits. This extends from adolescence into adulthood. Sharing romantic getaways and close dinners with your spouse, you cherish every moment spent together. Holding your loved ones close, you recognize them as the most precious treasure in your life. Your love for them drives you to make the most of every minute, even when unexpected opportunities lead you to leave the city for a while. No matter where you go, your heart longs to return to the warm embrace of family. Grateful for their presence, you express your thanks to God daily, understanding that your family brings immense joy and happiness into your life. In this state of contentment and bliss, you find solace in believing that life cannot get any better. Take a moment to ponder these words as they sink into your consciousness. Happiness radiates from the faces of the people before me. Kent, picture yourself watching a movie with your beloved wife. In a scene, she finds herself in a hotel room with 3 men and 2 women. Each woman selects a card from the deck, and your wife's face lights up with joy when she reveals her ace of spades. Given this scenario, Kent, do you still believe in your wife's love for you? Emily, envision your husband as one of the men in this movie. How do you feel about forgiveness? Are you willing to seek help from a psychologist and overcome this issue together? Kent sat there, his eyes filled with tears, and Emily sobbed beside him. Both needed time to process my words and regain control of their overwhelming emotions. As the film concluded and the credits rolled, it became evident that the group had consistently released 4 films a year for 24 years. Surprisingly, We even gained access to a live broadcast of them shooting another movie in a hotel room just a kilometer away from us. Additionally, I managed to collect over 40 hours of video recordings from your mother and her colleagues during the 3 previous expeditions. Wouldn't it be devastating to discover that you're not the biological parent of your children, or worse, that your husband is the biological father of someone else's child? How would you feel upon learning such revelations? Continuing my thoughts, I presented a scenario where the person dearest to you decides to leave you and your children a day early to engage in entertainment with a group of people solely for an extra day of fornication activities. Furthermore, they decide to extend their stay for an additional 2 days solely to continue their close life. When your spouse returns home, it takes a whole day for them to recover before being with you, the person they claim to love. How much love, respect, and care do you think they feel for their spouses or children? Your mother not only disrespected and lied to me, but to both of you. Kent, holding back tears, responded that he had never thought about it from that point of view and acknowledged that his father was right. He expressed that he wouldn't want his wife to treat him in a similar manner and hadn't anticipated that his mom would prefer spending more time with this group instead of being at home. Kent expressed his love, stated uncertainty about being around tomorrow, and apologized for the pain his father was going through. He promised to keep his father posted and mentioned that if his husband ever did such a thing, she would give him a good kick. Emily expressed her gratitude for being such a wonderful father and stated her love for him. She acknowledged that Kent seemed to put his interests ahead of theirs, similar to how their mom chose her group. Emily also mentioned that she and her father would be there tomorrow, and that it was time for Kent to step up and become a responsible adult. Taken aback by Emily's unexpected reaction and outburst, I admired my kids with a burning look. Emily inquired about the plan of action for tomorrow. I explained that I had invited the spouses of the members of this company, consisting of 6 people, to join us tomorrow for a surprise celebration. Their spouses believed that we were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, and since they had been with Danya all these years, I decided it would be appropriate for them to take part in the celebration. You and Kent are the only ones who know about this in advance. I want it to be a complete surprise for everyone else. I plan to provide them with all the evidence I have so that they can freely express their emotions and calmly react to their unfaithful partners. By the way, don't forget that you have stepbrothers and sisters that you might want to meet later. All 5 remaining partners joined us at the hotel. We had the opportunity to meet, get acquainted, and enjoy a delicious lunch at 2 p.m. Our group, including Kent, went to the hotel where Donna's class was taking place. When we entered the lobby of the hotel, the rest of my unexpected guests were already waiting for us. Among them were a lawyer from Dave Ford's office, Frank's employee, and an experienced videographer. To top it off, a florist arrived at 2:30 p.m. to deliver 25 red roses ordered by me personally. Emily and other women couldn't help but admire their beauty and noted how beautiful they looked. Emily's eyes were blazing with determination. She was preparing for the upcoming battle. Taking a break to calm down, I told her that everything was in my hands. At exactly 2:45 p.m., we went to the meeting room, Emily leading the way and Kent following. The couple, overcome with anticipation, looked no less excited. Carrying a bouquet of 25 roses, I entered Donna's classroom at 3 p.m., accompanied by John Manning and his video camera. Donna's face turned crimson when she noticed me approaching with flowers and a smile on my face. I playfully noticed that her blush was perfectly combined with roses, which caused a burst of laughter from everyone present. Smiling, Donna looked at me and then turned to face the class, introducing me as JT, her beloved husband. Scanning the room, I noticed the other 5 people scattered around, just as I expected. Turning back to Dunya, I conveyed that I knew today was the last day of classes, and before they all left, I would appreciate their help to make this day unforgettable for her. I shared that this Sunday, we would be celebrating our amazing 25th wedding anniversary. Right on cue, a group led by Emily emerged from the hallway. As they entered, the photographer captured a stunning picture of Donna's face. Although her expression was absolutely priceless, the close group members appeared to be in complete panic. Grinning broadly, I stood and observed as Emily introduced Dawn to the spouses of her friends involved in ducks. It was clear that Emily was relishing the unfolding drama, and I realized her future husband should be cautious. I explained that we were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this Sunday and hoped to get their help to make it special. I mentioned that next month, Donna would be marking the 25th anniversary of her work in this company, making it truly wonderful when two significant events happened in such a short time. I found it interesting. Around the same time, George, Henry, Chuck Jones, and Catherine joined the company. To make this event more memorable, I invited their spouses to join us. I informed them that John would be recording this special event on video, so they should take a moment and say a few words to the camera before leaving. After a pause and a deep breath, my pulse began to slow down, allowing me to truly appreciate the familiar faces of this incredible group of 6 people. I invited George, Henry, Chuck, Joyce, and Catherine to step forward and join us. The group moved to the front of the room, receiving applause from other participants. When Emily appeared next to me, I sensed she was eagerly anticipating what was coming. Taking her hand in mine, I guided her to George. In a calm voice, I introduced George Thomas as Emily's biological father. Donna's face turned pale. She looked like a ghost. George's wife stared at me with disbelief and asked me to repeat my words. I confirmed that, indeed, George is Emily's biological father. George found his voice and questioned why I thought he was her father. I extended my hand, and the lawyer placed 3 documents in my palm. Turning to George, I handed him the first document, saying it was a petition for a court-ordered paternity test. Handing him the second document, I continued, stating that I was suing him, demanding 21 years of unpaid alimony and compensation for emotional suffering caused. Finally, I handed George a copy of the lawsuit against his employer, explaining it was a lawsuit for non-compliance with the moral obligations in his employment contract. I assured George's wife that I had copies of all the evidence she could use at her discretion. The atmosphere in the room became chaotic, as other spouses realized this wasn't a joyful celebration. Amidst the chaos, I found comfort in my own amusement. Unexpectedly, Kent approached me, stood tall, and silently nodded in appreciation. At that moment, pride overwhelmed me as I looked at Kent. With a sense of achievement, I guided us to Chuck, intending to introduce him similarly to how I introduced Emily to her biological father. I said to Kent, trying to sound confident, that I wanted him to meet his biological father, Charles Nixon. A eerie silence filled the room when Chuck's middle name was pronounced. As the name lingered, the lawyer calmly handed me the documents. Thoroughly, I went through each page with Chuck, repeating the process I had done with George. Chuck's wife, concerned that she had copies, confirmed I had them. When the realization hit that Dawn had only 2 children, a sense of calm settled over everyone in the room. Smiling, I anticipated that I wouldn't let the others get away unscathed. They enjoyed their games, and now it's time for them to face the consequences. Dunya sat on a chair, tears streaming down her face. I announced, realizing my appearance had caught them by surprise, that they should get ready because the real fun was about to begin. A silence enveloped the room, as if a pin could be heard falling. Taking a deep breath, I continued, revealing a secret that had been buried for 5 long months. Doe, Jones, Catherine, George, Chuck, and Henry attended classes together for the sole purpose of avoiding their duties. This charade has been going on for over 2 decades. Discussing this revelation, I couldn't help but mention Emily, who recently turned 23. The truth was finally out, and the consequences were about to unfold. Let's break it down. Henry is the biological father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son, the eldest daughter of Emily. Catherine is George's biological child, Kent's biological father, and Chuck's daughter. Surprisingly, Joyce's son is actually her husband's child. Can you believe it? Of the 7 children these 3 women have, only 1 is the child of their spouse. The room was in complete chaos. I won't delve into the rest of the events in detail. Picture a scenario where all the necessary legal documents have been successfully delivered. Copies of these documents were given to the spouses, leading to a massive upheaval within the group of 6 people. Handing Dawn the divorce papers, I firmly stated that she should not contact me, return home, or attempt to see me again. I couldn't help but express my deep disappointment with her deceitful and wrong actions. Sitting in my hotel room, I spent some time pondering the events related to Donna and her friends. But my thoughts were interrupted by Emily, who suddenly appeared next to me. Initially, I planned to confront Dana, gradually addressing each member of her group and eventually revealing the truth about the children. Emily had a strong desire to meet face-to-face with her biological father. As for me, I decided to abandon my original plan and go with the flow. My main goal was to inform the group of 6 people that I had discovered their infidelity and exposed them to their spouses. I wanted to publicly shame them in front of my colleagues and take legal action against them by handing them the claim documents. As a result, their spouses were left furious, bringing me a sense of satisfaction and self-confidence. Suddenly, a knock interrupted my thoughts, prompting me to open the door. To my surprise, my children were standing there, the same ones who had previously helped their mother into her room. After greeting them, I asked what brought them to my doorstep. Emily hugged me tightly, showing her love for me. She began, acknowledging my reluctance to discuss her mother, and mentioned that she understood that I didn't want to hear about her mom. However, she explained that Danya was in a fragile state, and she had decided to take her home the next day and give her a whole week to pack her things before returning to Atlanta. Despite everything Danya had done to our family, Emily expressed that she couldn't help but love her. There was determination in Emily's eyes, and I realized that Danya was in desperate need of someone's support. I was grateful to Emily for doing what was right for her mother. The last few days had shown me that Emily is an incredibly resilient and strong woman. Kent, expressing himself, said that he loved me and despised the way Mom ruined our family. He asked if he could accompany me on my trip home tomorrow. Without hesitation, I happily agreed, saying that I would be glad if he came home with me tomorrow. Emily got up from her seat, hugged me, and said she was going to stay the night with her mom because she didn't think Danya should be left alone. As she walked out the door, her last words were, "Daddy, I love you." Kent and I spent a few hours together, drank several bottles of beer, after which he went to his room. 5 years have passed since I dismantled a gang of 6 people that once flourished, and I am glad to report that these years have been prosperous for me. The satisfaction I feel regarding the consequences inflicted on this group is immeasurable. Over the next week, all 6 people were dismissed from their posts. Now they are divorced, have no means of livelihood, broken, and completely alone. Strangely enough, their past keeps coming up and tormenting them whenever they manage to find a decent job, which eventually forces them to look for an alternative job. I would like to take responsibility for their misfortunes, but another structure is closely monitoring their actions. They are trying to rebuild their lives and establish relationships with their children. But I am very pleased to report that their path is far from over. Their ex-partners only reach out when they need money. Some of them are slowly rebuilding connections with their kids. When I returned to Atlanta and spent a night in our house, I realized I couldn't stay there again. It held too many memories that were too painful. In my search for a new home, I temporarily stayed in a hotel. Kent joined me on the trip to Atlanta, but later moved to Dallas, Texas, where he landed his first real job. He seems happy with his work and has been promoted 4 times. Currently single, he actively dates and enjoys his job, contemplating joining my company this summer. Even though 5 years have passed, the relationship with their mother remains strained. They occasionally talk on the phone. Kent hadn't seen his mother for a long time since we left Orlando. On the other hand, Kent and Emily converse almost daily. The consequences of exposing the gang of 6 have profoundly affected us, especially the children. I'm uncertain if Kent will ever trust someone enough for marriage, but Emily took Donna with her to Naples for a week. Emily constantly thwarted Donna's attempts to explain, insisting she leave it for her therapist, as she wasn't interested in what she considered lies. Emily firmly believes she can't find an adequate explanation for Donna's actions and the subsequent destruction of their family. Furthermore, Donna didn't receive an invitation to Emily's private wedding, celebrating their first anniversary. Presently, Emily and her husband Trey live in Atlanta, choosing not to work in my company, although Emily joined 2 years ago. Despite this, I value her nearby presence, discovering she has a natural talent for business. Emily made it clear to Trey from the start about the consequences if she found out about his infidelity, knowing well what Donna had done. After exposing the gang of 6, Their spouses and children gathered in Atlanta 8 months later. Being around people who experienced similar emotions and tried to move forward helped us navigate life. The children have formed strong bonds and continue to communicate. In 3 weeks, we're heading to Nashville for another meeting. It turns out, when the gang of 6 began cheating, instead of engaging closeness, they paired up for a week. Emily and Kent were named after George's mother and his father, respectively, forever connecting them to their biological father. Even after 5 years, their relationship with Donna remains strained. Emily at least agrees to have lunch, but Kent categorically refuses to meet her once. I was deeply in love with Donna until I discovered her deceit and infidelity. I understand it's tough for some men to move forward, but I'm not one of them. Life goes on. We have 2 options: give up or get up and move on. My children depended on me, and I depended on them. Dana and I agreed she'd keep the house, as she believed it held too many cherished memories to part with. I, on the other hand, had different views. I also settled matters with George and Chuck, placing the money they provided in trust funds for Emily and Kent. My intention wasn't to profit, but to make them feel the consequences of their actions. 6 months after finalizing our divorce, I decided to start dating again. My main goal was to find someone special to share my love and life with. The key to a full and joyful life is both loving someone and being loved in return. Until that happens, I'll patiently search and wait for Emily to give me grandchildren to shower with affection. It's crucial to note that committing such deceptive actions as betrayal doesn't lead to positive outcomes. In the end, retribution only perpetuates a destructive cycle. Additionally, Donna faced humiliation publicly, and karma punished her. Her relationships with men faltered, and she struggled to find decent employment. Currently, she works as a cook in a fast food restaurant, and a terrible incident occurred at work. Hot oil from the deep fryer spilled over her body from the waist down. Her skin suffered 95% damage. It's like Donna has been scalded alive. I can't fathom the pain. Now she's in the clinic under close medical supervision.
Story 4.
I grew up in a wealthy family, with money being something inherited, not earned. As a child, I didn't fully understand how everything worked, but I knew we were financially secure. Over time, as I got older, I began to understand the responsibilities and expectations that came with it. I didn't build the business, but now I'm the one running it. My great-grandfather started the company, and it's been our family's responsibility ever since. The business, DMI Industrial, has gone through several changes over the years, with different partners coming and going, but it's always been a central part of my life, shaping both my personal and professional choices. The company was originally called Melvin Dwops Bennett and Company, but after a scandal during 1 and 2, the Bennetts were pushed out. My grandfather, Robert Dwops, saved the business by investing some of his personal wealth, giving him a larger share and control. The name changed to Dwops, Melvin, and Iovine Industrial to reflect the company's growth. In the 90s, my dad shortened it to DMI Industrial to make it more memorable. Over the last 20 years, the Iovines faced challenges and sold off most of their stock, which my dad eagerly bought. Now, our family controls 78% of the company, with the Melvins holding 18% and the Iovines only 4%. Despite my wealth, I work hard like everyone else. I'm constantly balancing customer demands for lower prices with employee expectations for better pay and benefits. Unions and rising healthcare costs are tough to manage, but that's part of the job. However, this story isn't about business. It's about my life and my marriage, both of which were struggling recently. My name is Wayne. I'm 27, and while I'm well off, I wasn't happily married. My wife, Ada, who everyone calls Ai, is incredibly beautiful and charming. Maybe too much so for me. I'm just a regular guy who works hard and doesn't live a flashy lifestyle. I spend most of my time at the company's plants, making sure things run smoothly, or in the office handling financial matters. AI was the most beautiful girl in school, always dating the popular athletes. Meanwhile, I dated nice girls, and during my junior and senior years, I was in love with Maria Hess. She was nothing like Ada. Maria was petite with pale skin and red hair, while Ada is tall, blonde, and tan. When Maria first transferred to our school, I was instantly drawn to her. She approached me to show her around, and despite a slightly awkward start, we hit it off. We walked around the school, and by the time I led her to her next class, I could tell something special was developing between us. From that moment, everything changed. After Maria sat down, I introduced her to everyone at the table. Some of the girls offered to show her around, but she politely declined, saying she had me for that. A few people were surprised because I usually only hung out with girls as friends, never in serious relationships, since I knew most high school romances wouldn't last. I attended most school dances with friends, without any pressure for more than just a good time. I typically went with girls like Louise Jefferson, Edith Bunker, and Maud Finley, who were part of my circle. The jocks and cheerleaders had their high school relationships, but the rest of us didn't take things that seriously. From the start, Maria shook things up. Near the end of lunch, Paul Ace Fraley from the jock table came over with a couple of cheerleaders to introduce himself to Maria. He clearly had his eye on her. When he told her his nickname was Ace, Maria asked if it was because he played cards, adding she thought gambling was dumb. His confidence wavered, and when she asked him if he used steroids, implying they affected his brain and ego, he was clearly embarrassed. I tried to defuse the situation by complimenting his performance in last week's football game. Ace quickly shifted gears, puffing out his chest again and inviting me to the game that weekend, before walking away with his pride intact. As Ace left, Ada, the school's princess, smiled at me for the first time, acknowledging my existence. Maria noticed this and squeezed my hand tightly, glaring at her. The table burst into stifled laughter. Maria had definitely made an impression. After lunch, we had an assembly. The principal introduced Maria as the newest student and asked her what she liked about the area. With her sharp sense of humor, she replied, "I like the Wayne," confusing the principal, who thought she meant rain. The whole room laughed, and I was left red-faced as my friends teased me. Over the next few weeks, several athletes tried and failed to get Maria's attention. She even declined an invitation to join the cheerleading squad, joking that she was too uncoordinated and didn't want to embarrass herself. This puzzled some people, especially after seeing her impressive dives at a pool party I hosted, where she had shown surprising athleticism. Maria was full of contradictions. My parents adored her, and my dad urged me not to let her slip away. Most of my guy friends said I was lucky, and while half the girls liked her, the other half didn't. If a girl showed any interest in me, Maria could be ruthless, like with Edith, Louise, and Maud, who learned that firsthand. Once Maria disliked someone, there was no redemption. Edith experienced this when she casually asked me to the Sadie Hawkins dance, unaware that Maria had already claimed me. Maria immediately responded, coldly telling Edith that she had already asked me, accusing her of trying to embarrass her. Edith was confused, as we'd always hung out with different people without it being a big deal. But from then on, Maria made sure Edith was excluded from events, with invitations often being accidentally incorrect, like the time Edith showed up to a formal dinner dressed as a clown. I felt guilty, but I was too in love with Maria to stand up to her. In our senior year, things intensified. Maria made sure we had the same schedule, even taking auto shop with me, and we spent nearly every moment together. We were accepted to the same colleges, and Maria suggested we work over the summer to rent an apartment together. My parents approved, thinking it would teach me responsibility, and my dad even gave us jobs. I was thrilled, and Maria explained that once we had the apartment, we'd no longer be pures. She said she had fallen for me the moment we met, and though it took me a bit longer, I felt the same way. Some friends thought it was because of my family's money, but Maria liked me long before she knew I was wealthy. However, none of our plans came to fruition. Just 2 weeks before graduation, Maria's family was in a car accident after her grandmother's funeral. Her father, driving under the influence, crashed, eliminating himself, his wife, and their son. Maria fought for her life for nearly a week but never regained consciousness. When she passed, it felt like part of my heart was ripped away. I spent the summer in deep depression, unable to understand how life could lift me so high only to drop me so hard. By the time I was ready to function again, it was too late to get into a dorm, so I rented an apartment for college. My first weeks were miserable. Though I had friends at the same school, I was still too depressed for them to know how to approach me. I dressed entirely in black, from my clothes to my sunglasses, and looking back, I may have inadvertently started the goth trend. It took an old friend, Ace Fraley, to pull me out of my depression. Ace wasn't doing well in college. He was struggling on the football team and in his classes, on the verge of losing his scholarship. His high school habits of hanging out with the popular crowd weren't helping him anymore. Ace and Ada had drifted into a relationship, though it wasn't going smoothly. Jack had left for the military, and Ada was too focused on her studies to join the cheerleading team, which didn't sit well with Ace. They started arguing more often. I later found out they weren't a good match. clinging to each other out of familiarity as they both adjusted to being less significant in the college environment. I was deep in my own depression when one afternoon, I overheard Ace and Ada arguing loudly. As Ace, clearly drunk, raised his hand to hit her, I intervened. "Ace, what are you doing?" I asked, reminding him that hitting anyone, especially in public, would get him kicked off the team. He mumbled an apology, gave me a drunken hug, and walked away. Ada stood there, shaken, and admitted Ace had almost hit her before. She then broke down, hugging me and crying. I didn't know how to respond, and though I tried to stay composed, I couldn't help but notice how good she smelled and felt in that moment, reminding me that I was still human, despite everything I'd been through. "Thanks, Wayne," Ada said, giving me a strange look. For a second, I thought she might have felt how close we were. She seemed unsure of what to say. "Wayne, we've known each other a long time, and I've wanted to say I'm sorry about your girlfriend. I just didn't know how to bring it up since we never really talked." "Thanks," I replied. "I've been pretty out of it. For 2 years, I know this might be the wrong time," she interrupted. "But do you remember the first day Maria came to our high school?" "I remember," I said. "It was the first time you ever noticed me." "It wasn't the first time I noticed you," she corrected. "It was just the first time I got close enough to see the kind of person you were. You handled that situation so well, letting everyone keep their pride. I wanted to talk to you afterward, but what?" I asked, intrigued. "You know, Maria," she said softly. "It wasn't just Maria," I reminded her. "You were with Jack too." "That's different," she replied. "Jack was a good guy, and as long as I was up front with him, he'd have been okay. But Maria? No way. What do you mean?" I asked, curious. "From the first day Maria came to school, she made it clear to everyone that you were hers. She didn't care about popularity, cheerleading, or clubs. You were her priority. While your group of friends dated around freely, once Maria showed up, it all changed. Anyone who tried to get close to you ended up on her bad side, and once you were on her list, you stayed there." I thought back to the day Ace had tried to sit with us. Yeah, I remember how she humiliated Ace when he tried to bring her over to his table. "She really knew how to cut people down," I said. "Exactly," Ada nodded. "Even when people thought she'd be a great cheerleader after seeing her dives at your pool, she resisted anything that could come between you two." "Is that bad?" I asked. "Not necessarily," she replied. "But maybe having the chance to experience other people would have been good for you both." "Maybe," I admitted. "All I know is I miss her. It feels like part of my heart is gone." "Wayne, I know this sounds harsh, but you still have friends if you need to talk," she said gently. "I know," I replied. "It's just easier to sit in my apartment and grieve." Ada's eyes widened. "Wait, you have an apartment?" she asked. "Yeah, I couldn't get into the dorms at the last minute. Do you realize how crowded the dorms are?" she exclaimed. "I'm sharing a room designed for 2 with 3 other girls. It's chaotic. I can barely study." "I guess I'm lucky," I said. "Wayne, you have so much life ahead of you," she said softly. "If Maria loved you as much as you loved her, she'd want you to keep living, for both of you." I nodded, waved goodbye, and hurried off to my class, still thinking about everything she said. About a day after our conversation, things started to change. I was sitting on the couch in front of my fireplace, reading a chapter for class, with a bowl of popcorn and a cold beer. Even though I was only 19 and technically not old enough to drink, it was my apartment. So I made my own rules. I heard a knock on the door and answered it to find Ada standing there. She smiled and said, "I was debating." "Debating what?" I asked, confused. "I was trying to decide if you're an a-hole or just out of practice," she said, walking past me into the apartment. She explained that she'd asked some of our high school friends about me, and they all thought I was a good, normal guy, despite being rich. "So I figured you're just out of practice with women," she continued. "What am I out of practice at?" I asked. "Reading signals," she replied. "For the past 2 years you've been taken, so you missed out on that." I tried to defend myself, saying I never really learned that stuff. She smiled. "Yesterday, I hinted about how lucky you are to have all this space, hoping you'd invite me to study here." She looked around the apartment, clearly impressed. "But you didn't even tell me where you live." "Sorry," I said. "Maybe I am out of practice." "No harm done," she said, looking at the fireplace and the popcorn. "So, what are you doing?" I held up my book, explaining I had chapters to read before class. "I don't want to disturb you," she said, taking a seat in the chair. "I like beer too, you know." That night was quiet. We both read in near silence, occasionally glancing at each other, but Not much was said. Around 9:30, she stretched and thanked me for letting her use the space. "I thought your building's curfew was 11? I asked. "I had to take 3 buses to get here," she smiled. "I don't want to be out late alone." I offered to drive her home, and she smiled, saying, "Your friends were right. You are a nice guy." The next night, she knocked again, asking if she could get her spot back. This time, she brought another girl, Heather, who was studying pre-med and couldn't focus in her own dorm. Heather was quiet, took juice instead of beer, and joined us for another evening of studying. Ada settled into her chair, and we all worked peacefully together. The next evening, Ada came back alone. When I asked about Heather, she shrugged and said she didn't need a ride home, as she could take the bus. I insisted on driving her, though, not wanting her to be out alone in the cold. She smiled and started preparing a quick dinner, saying we couldn't live on popcorn and beer. After dinner, we settled into our usual spots on the couch. This time, though, there was more eye contact, and she kept smiling at me. I asked her about Ace, and she casually mentioned they were no longer together. I apologized, but she smiled and said, "I wouldn't be here with you most nights if we were still together. I'm not that kind of girl." Later, when I was driving her home, she asked if I was going home for the weekend. When I said I hadn't decided, she hinted that if I wasn't, she'd like to go to a movie with me. I was surprised and hesitated, telling her she was like a goddess, and I couldn't understand why she'd want to go out with me. She cut me off, saying, "I'm just a person. If I were that amazing, Jack wouldn't have left for the army. After everything, including losing my pureness to him, all he said was, 'Okay then.'" Tears welled up in Ada's eyes as she recounted. The next day, Jack called to tell me he was leaving early for camp to get a head start. Officer training is competitive, apparently. Before he left, I was expecting some heartfelt goodbye after all our time together in high school. Instead, he just said, "Well, bye." She shook her head. "Some goddess, right?" I hugged her as she continued. And Ace was worse. When I got to school here, he just came up to me and said, "Jack's gone. I guess it's us now." He acted like he inherited me. He even told me he knew I'd slept with Jack. I guess Jack talked more to him about it than to me. Ace treated me like I was just a hand-me-down. You probably saw some of that. Then she paused and added, "Wayne, back in high school, when you thought I noticed you for the first time, if Maria hadn't claimed you, I would have done more than just notice. What I saw was a guy who kept a bad situation from getting worse. You gave Ace a way out and stopped him from getting expelled or getting into a fight. You kept everyone's dignity intact. I never forgot that, but Maria was always watching you. That's why this might not be a good idea," I said. "Wayne, I hate to say this, but she's gone. You need to keep living. She wouldn't want you to be miserable. So as a friend, let's go to a movie." And we did. It was just the beginning. Soon, Ada and I spent all our free time together. We continued studying together, often with food she cooked. After Thanksgiving break, things changed. We'd met each other's families. My parents loved Ada, especially my dad, and assumed we were more than friends. When I explained we weren't, my mom just gave me a knowing look. Ada's parents acted the same, treating me like part of the family. We spent more time together, and when we went out, we were always close. One night, when a snowstorm was forecasted, Ada still insisted on coming over to study, dismissing the storm warnings. She lit the fireplace, and we settled in with popcorn and beer. Hours later, when it was time to take her home, we realized we were snowed in. The blizzard was too intense, classes were canceled, and there was no way for me to get her back to her dorm. Ada smiled at me and said, "I guess I'll have to stay over." I felt like a cartoon wolf watching sheep. I was nervous, but Ada was perfectly calm. "It'll be fine, Wayne," she said. "Just get me a t-shirt or sweatshirt to sleep in, and I'll crash on the couch." I offered her my bed, but she insisted on the couch. We settled in and watched an old movie, The Girl Can't Help It. Ada reminded me of Jane Mansfield, blonde, curvy, with an incredible smile. As the movie went on, Ada, wearing just my sweatshirt and underwear, fell asleep on me. I gently placed a pillow under her head and covered her with a blanket. She looked beautiful, and I was tempted to kiss her, but I resisted and headed to bed. The snow outside was piling up, and I realized we might be stuck for a while. I drifted off, only to wake up later to the smell of bacon. Ada was in the kitchen, but something seemed off. When I greeted her, she didn't seem as cheerful as the night before. We sat down for breakfast, and almost at the same time, we both spoke. I asked if something was wrong, and she blurted out, "You don't like me, do you?" Surprised, I asked why she thought that. She explained that last night had been planned. She'd lied about the weather, packed a bag with clothes and makeup, and expected something more to happen. "Why didn't you kiss me?" she asked. "That was a magic moment, and you let it slip away." I stumbled to explain, saying I wasn't good at reading signals. When I looked at you, I did want to kiss you, I admitted. Let me guess. You felt like you were cheating on Maria? She asked. No, I said. I didn't want to take advantage of you. After what you told me about Ace and Jack, I didn't want to be just another guy in the line. Ada sighed. My luck continues, she said. Jack wasn't great, but that was partly my fault. It was prom, and I went along with it because everyone else was. It wasn't romantic or special, it just happened, Ada continued. Then Ace came along, and I just went along with it again. We were a couple by default, and he kept other guys away from me. We had intimacy because it was expected, not because I wanted to. But then I started spending time with this really nice guy, someone who treated me better than anyone else had outside of my parents. He never made a move, though, and I kept waiting for him to. Eventually, I decided to help things along and asked him out. Her eyes widened. We started going out, and there were nights when I'd stay in his apartment studying. I wanted to kiss him so badly, but he never did anything. When our legs brushed on the couch, I was so turned on, but still nothing happened. I saw the storm coming and imagined being snowed in with him. But even then, after we snuggled on the couch, he still didn't make a move. So I thought he just didn't want me. I stayed silent. Wayne, you said you don't know the signals. A girl walking around in your apartment in just a shirt and underwear wants you. If she snuggles close under a blanket, she wants you. If she gets into bed with you, she really wants you. Oh, I muttered. See what I mean? She sighed. The one guy I really want does nothing. I reached out, gently touched her face, and pulled her into a kiss. It was electric, and soon we were holding each other tightly, kissing passionately. The moment was filled with magic. Bacon fell off the table, but Ada didn't care. She led me to the living room, urging me to light the fire. As the fire glowed, she pulled off my sweatshirt, revealing her body, which was even more stunning than I imagined. She smiled and asked, "Why am I the only one under the blanket?" I quickly undressed and joined her, our bodies touching and igniting a spark between us. "Wayne, I'm on the pill," she said, then asked, "Was Maria the only person you've been with?" I hesitated. "No one," I admitted shyly. Her mood softened. "You've never done this before?" she asked gently. I shook my head, embarrassed. "That's wonderful," she reassured me. "Let me take care of everything." She guided me through what she liked, showing me how to touch her. It was magical, and soon we were wrapped up in each other. We made love, and it was incredible. Afterward, we lay together by the fire, but something seemed to be on her mind. "What's wrong, I asked. She sighed. "I just feel like I wasted my first time. This was what it should have been like. It was so beautiful." "We don't live in a perfect world," I said, and maybe it helped that one of us knew what to do. She smiled, raising her head. "You're being silly," she said. "Wayne, I came. Women don't always finish, you know." I hadn't known that, but Ada smiled and reassured me. Maybe that's why intimacy never seemed special to me before. I'd never really enjoyed it until now. Then she playfully slapped me. "You're an idiot. We could have been doing this for weeks," she teased, resting her head back on my chest. For the rest of that day, and the next, we explored each other, discovering what we liked. We tried new things, keeping what we liked and discarding the rest. We found what truly connected us. Over time, we grew even closer. Of course, life wasn't perfect. I struggled with depression over Maria, feeling guilty at times. On her end, Ada dealt with jealousy early on, but after our first Valentine's Day, when I told her I loved her, she changed. She blossomed, realizing we were meant to be, and stopped worrying about other women. From then on, we faced our challenges together, growing stronger as a couple. After that, Ada changed. She started walking with more confidence, wearing clothes she knew would catch my attention, as we were both very into each other physically. She didn't care about other men, but they certainly noticed her. She transformed from the distant beauty men assumed they had no chance with to someone everyone wanted. Even Ace, who was struggling in school, started telling people he had been with her and dumped her. I had to confront him, and though I felt bad for him, I asked him to stop spreading lies. One big challenge for us was telling our parents we were living together. We built it up in our minds, putting it off for months. But when we finally did, it turned out to be no big deal. My parents loved her, and her father even joked that he already knew. He mentioned how obvious it was that we belonged together, and he didn't mind saving money on room and board. His approval left us relieved. Fast forward 2 years, and we graduated, got married, and both began working at my family's company. Ada joined the marketing department on her own merits and kept her work life professional. Everything seemed perfect, until things began to unravel. A few weeks before Halloween, Ada started acting differently. We argued more, and her usually calm demeanor became confrontational. Our once active lovemaking life dwindled, and I found myself retreating to my den to avoid the tension. She began staying out late, and I suspected she was having an affair. The breaking point came when she came home drunk one night, wearing nothing but a long coat, missing her skirt and underwear. She showered and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep beside her and moved to another room. The next morning, I told her I wanted a divorce, accusing her of cheating. Ada didn't deny my request, but warned she would take everything since we had no prenup. My lawyer confirmed I'd need proof of infidelity to stand a chance. Despite her smirks and glares, there was sadness in her eyes, as though she was hurting too. Something felt off, like she was being controlled or manipulated, but I couldn't figure it out. Even though everyone believed Ada loved me deeply, I was left retreating into my den, dealing with the depression that came with watching my marriage fall apart.
My once perfect life was falling apart. I kept hoping Wayne would realize what I wanted. One look at me should have been enough for him to understand. But instead, we were drifting further apart, and he didn't seem to see what he was about to lose. At first, I thought withholding Zex might snap him out of it, but that only hurt me too. I wasn't successful anyway. He'd touch me and my body would respond instantly. I had to try something else, but nothing worked. Ever since that woman visited him at work, he'd been different. I even watched him in the den a few times, and what I saw shocked me. I didn't know how to deal with it. I ended up taking a day off to see an expert. She advised me to ramp up my efforts to grab his attention and gave me something expensive, though I doubted it would work. Then I ran into Ace, who had just returned to town. He was different. Attentive and kind, telling me how beautiful I was and how Wayne didn't appreciate me. From there, things spiraled. The final straw came when Ace brought me home drunk. I kissed him at our door just as Wayne opened it. Ace looked terrified and ran off, while I nearly stumbled inside. Wayne stormed off to the den. We had a Halloween party planned that night with our families and friends attending, but everything was falling apart.
I settled into the old leather chair in my den without turning on the computer. I unlocked the desk drawer with the only key I had and pulled out the diary. In just a few weeks, this little book had become my most valued possession. I remembered the day a woman came to my office to give it to me. She had no appointment, but insisted my secretary Joan let her in, saying it was about Maria. Hearing Maria's name sent a chill through me, even though it was a warm day. I realized this must be Maria's sister, Laura. I felt a pang of guilt for never reaching out to her after the accident. We hadn't spoken at the funeral, each locked in our own grief. Laura walked in nervously, and I met her halfway. She handed me the book and said, "You have to take this. I can't keep it anymore. She wants you to have it." I thought she might be unstable. Maybe grief had overwhelmed her. She pressed Maria's worn diary into my hands, looking almost relieved. I recognized it immediately. Maria had always written in it. The pages were damaged, and the cover was partially burned. "This is Maria's diary," I said, remembering how she used to plan our future in it. Laura didn't want anything for it. "She had it with her at the end," she said, scanning the room nervously. She left quickly after that, seeming calmer once the diary was in my possession. I barely noticed her departure as I flipped through the pages, searching for memories I recognized and new insights from Maria's final days. As I read, I felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching me. The office door closed on its own, and for a moment I thought Ada was playing a trick on me like she had before. She'd once hidden in my office bathroom and surprised me, leading to an intimate encounter right there in my office. Afterward, when we stepped out, people gave us strange looks, and Joan, ever the professional, ushered us back into my office. She told me to handle my employees while advising Ada to wait until the coast was clear. Joan pointed out that Ada's hair was messy, her makeup smeared, and visible bite marks were on her neck. "You look like a vampire got a hold of you," Joan had said, noting the unmistakable signs of our encounter. Joan reminded Ada that while she was beautiful and people would notice, this was still a workplace and discretion was key. As I thought about that past incident with Ada, the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift, almost as if the room itself was angry at me. It felt ridiculous, and I realized I might just be overworked. I decided to take the rest of the afternoon off, bringing Maria's diary home with me to read. Since she had passed years ago, I didn't feel like I was invading her privacy. Maybe reading her thoughts would bring me some comfort and help me move on. Though I loved Ada deeply, a part of my heart would always belong to Maria. Normally I'd text Ada to meet me at home, but that day it didn't feel right. I got home, went to the den, and started reading. Once I began, I couldn't stop. The more I read, the stranger I felt, as though I wasn't alone in the room. The air seemed to swirl around me, and it felt as if Maria herself was present. I was exhausted after just an hour, feeling drained not just mentally, but physically. Ada knocked on the door and came in, though she'd been in the den countless times before. She looked around as if the room felt different. "Come on, let's have dinner," she said. "I missed you." But as she spoke, I felt a strange tension, almost like a cloud of hate directed at her. She seemed to feel it too. "Let's get out of here," she said. "This room feels weird. Maybe we should redecorate?" I tried to stand, but I felt too weak. Ada helped me up, suggesting I go to bed, thinking I might be coming down with something. The next day, I found myself drawn back to the diary. Reading more, I started to relive memories of my time with Maria, discovering things I hadn't known. One surprising revelation was that no teacher had told Maria to ask me to show her around school. She had made it up, just as a way to meet me. From the moment she saw me, she believed we were destined to be together. Maria's diary revealed her belief in supernatural abilities passed down in her family, especially among the women. She believed she had the gift, an ability to enchant people with a touch. While I wasn't sure if this was real or just a fantasy, I couldn't deny that being with her had always felt magical. The diary also revealed how much Maria had struggled with jealousy, even feeling threatened by Ada that first day we met. Maria had noticed Ada looking at me and had made it her mission to alienate her, seeing her as competition. She had also sensed Ace's intentions and immediately disliked him, but my stepping in had reassured her that we were meant to be together. Lastly, I discovered Maria had been far more ready for us to take the next step than I'd realized. She had even gone on the pill in preparation for our first night together, which she had planned for when we moved into our apartment. She may have died a pure, but she had laid out our future in her mind, and everything had gone according to her plan, until the accident. The strangest part of Maria's diary was learning that she never wanted to go on that final trip with her family. She had even argued with her dad, reminding him that her sister didn't have to go. He assumed she wanted to stay behind to be with me, but when Maria insisted she was still a pure, he didn't believe her. Frustrated, she even offered to have her mother take her to the doctor to prove it, but her dad shut down the discussion, saying she was going because he said so. The next day, I drove over to say goodbye. We hugged tearfully while her parents rolled their eyes. Her dad, annoyed, said, "It's not like you're never going to see each other again. We'll be back in a few days." The last memory I had of her was her face pressed against the car window as they drove off. I loved her so much. As I thought about that moment, I felt like I saw someone out of the corner of my eye. I turned, but no one was there. Then, I heard what sounded like laughter. I tried to shake it off, thinking I was losing my mind. I had spent the whole afternoon thinking about the past, and I wondered if I'd ever truly move on from Maria. Suddenly, I heard a voice, clear as day. "You aren't meant to be with that bloated hoe. She's cheating on you." I turned and saw a translucent figure near me, Maria. She hadn't aged a day, still looking like she did at 18. I panicked, knocking over my chair and falling to the floor. "I'm not a vampire," she said with a smirk. "I'm here because we still feel the same way about each other." I stammered. "What do you mean?" "My spirit hasn't been able to move on," she said. "There are things I never got to do that keep me here." Maria explained that it had taken her years to gather enough strength to manifest, fueled by the connection to her diary. She'd spent a long time haunting her sister's house, trying to get her to give me the diary. After scaring her family and spelling it out on the bathroom mirror, her sister finally delivered it. Maria continued, "I thought not saying goodbye was what kept me here, but now I see there's more. Wayne, you've made a mess. You don't belong with Ada. She's cheating on you. If she really loved you, I wouldn't be here." As her image began to flicker, she said, "I'm out of energy, but I'll be back tomorrow. Love you." Then she disappeared, leaving only a strange smell behind. Later, Ada came to get me for dinner and noticed I was burning up. She helped me to bed and brought me soup. As she lay next to me, I couldn't help but think about what Maria had said. "Ada, maybe you shouldn't be around me if I'm sick," I said. "If you've got it, I want it too," she replied. "I promised you in sickness and in health." I hadn't suspected Ada was cheating before Maria said it, but now doubt crept into my mind. Ada asked, "Are you done reading Maria's diary?" "No, there's still a lot left," I said. Ada's expression changed, and for the first time, I began to look at her differently. A few days later, Ada told me she was staying home from work, but instead she went out of town without explaining why. When I asked her about her day, she didn't exactly lie, but she didn't tell the truth either. Later, I checked her credit card receipts and found out she had flown to New Orleans, stayed for an hour or two, and then returned. It seemed like she went there to meet someone and kept it from me. My mind spiraled. Maria had been right all along. I had always wondered why someone as stunning as Ada would choose a regular guy like me. For the first few years, I kept expecting her to leave me, but she never did. We'd been married for 7 years, and now it seemed like the 7-year itch had set in. Ada, now bored and with the means to do whatever she wanted, was cheating on me. Deep down, I didn't want to believe it. Maybe she had been cheating all along, and I had been too blind to see it. At events, men constantly hit on her. She was the kind of woman who got a lot of attention. Meanwhile, I was just an average-looking guy. Maybe she had married me for an easy life. That trip out of town made me start watching her more closely, and I consulted with lawyers about filing for divorce. The lawyers told me that without solid proof of her infidelity, I'd be at a disadvantage. While she couldn't take any part of the company or my stock, she could get half of my personal assets, which was substantial. Surprisingly, Ada didn't want the divorce. She said she'd fight it, and even if I won, she'd take everything she could. My lawyer suggested an open marriage, a common arrangement for some couples these days, but that wasn't for me. I believed in being with one woman. My problem, though, was that I was torn between 2 women, one alive and one dead, and somehow the dead one seemed to have the upper hand. I retreated into my den more frequently, and Ada's actions became even more suspicious. The final straw was the night of the Halloween party when she came home drunk with Ace. I couldn't take it anymore. I left her, drunk and barely able to stand, with a look of sadness in her eyes. Maybe things had gotten so bad that even she could see it. I still wanted to talk and work things out, perhaps give her some money, and let her keep her job at the company. Deep down, I still loved Ada, but I couldn't tolerate her cheating. As I sat in the den, Maria appeared, and I immediately felt drained. I could wake up feeling full of energy, but by the end of the day, I was always exhausted to the point of feeling lifeless. "You don't have to put up with her cheating," Maria said. "She's not right for you." Maria had been getting stronger each time she appeared. This time, she ran her ghostly hands over me, sending tingles through my body. I couldn't control myself as she touched me, and before long, I had lost control and stained my boxers again. "We would be so good together," she said. "Tell me how, and I'll divorce Ada tomorrow," I said, guilt washing over me as soon as the words left my mouth. "No, Wayne," she replied, smiling. By now, Maria had become almost solid, her feet firmly on the ground. "We need her. She'll never love you like I do, and she won't give you a divorce because she's too focused on the money. But we can still win this. It has to be tonight." "Why tonight?" I asked. "Because it's Halloween, the one night when the veil between worlds is thinnest. If you bring Ada into this room and give her my diary, it will give me the power to be with you fully, without being trapped in the body of an 18-year-old. Imagine, Wayne, us together forever. I'll show you everything I've ever wanted to do to you." Fueled by anger and the confusion I always felt around Maria, I agreed to something I never would have considered otherwise. "It has to be at midnight," she said. "Trust me, you're going to love this." A few hours later, the Halloween party was in full swing. Friends, family, and business contacts mingled, enjoying themselves. Ada, as usual, looked stunning in a Supergirl costume, though she wore an odd necklace that didn't quite fit. Men followed her around the party, and she flirted with them, but only when she knew I was watching. When I wasn't looking, she seemed sad. Maybe she was just trying to provoke me, reminding me she could do whatever she wanted. I was fed up. Any doubts I had about Maria's plan vanished. 5 minutes before midnight, I moved through the crowd. "Wayne, what are you supposed to be?" my mother-in-law asked, noticing my trench coat. "A flasher?" I whipped out a samurai sword and said, "I'm Duncan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod, the Highlander." Everyone laughed, including Ted from sales, who joked about my cheesy costume. I replied, "So what? My wife likes it," glancing at Ada. She smiled at me, and I knew immediately that I was making a mistake. Still, I grabbed Ada's hand and led her through the crowd. One man even called out to her, and although she assured him I was her husband and she loved me, I was furious again. We locked ourselves in the den, and people outside made playful assumptions about what we were doing. They had no idea. Ada started to speak, but I silenced her, pushing Maria's diary into her lap. She told me she loved me, and I knew in that moment I'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. Maria appeared, and Ada's eyes widened in shock. "You lying witch!" Maria hissed. "It's too late for you now!" There was screaming, and a strange glowing from Ada's necklace. Her body shook violently, as if she were having a seizure. Then a puff of green smoke filled the room, and everything went silent. "Ida?" I asked. She smiled at me, but something felt off. Suddenly, I felt stronger than I had in weeks. "Guess again," she replied with a smirk and kissed me passionately. "How soon can we get rid of these people?" she asked, eager to go to bed. "You have to call me Ada," she added. "How does she even walk with this body? It's like Jell-O on springs." I should have realized something was wrong, but Ada had always joked about her figure. She clung to me throughout the party, asking who everyone was. It felt good to have her touch, but something was different. "Maria, where is Ada?" I finally asked. Maria glared at me. "How should I know? Don't ask me about her again. Only you and I matter." "Maria, I loved Ada," I said firmly. "If she hadn't cheated, I'd still be with her. She was kind and loving, even through my struggles with grief over you. She was patient, and not many women would have been so understanding." Maria, smiling strangely, said, "I hope she's moved on, somewhere happy." "Maria," I said, "I loved you, but I loved Ada too. It was a different kind of love, more mature. Maybe it didn't burn as hot, but it was real. And for the record, I liked her body just the way it was, so please don't do anything to mess it up." I took her hand and we returned to the party. As soon as we stepped out, people smiled, and I found myself explaining who everyone was. The first awkward moment came when Ada's parents approached us. "Ada, you should be ashamed of yourself," her mother scolded, "leaving a house full of guests to do whatever you were doing in that room." "Ada, we know exactly what you were doing," her father chimed in. "From the sounds of it, you were doing a good job too." Normally, Ada would have been embarrassed, but Maria, in Ada's body, wasn't fazed. She smirked at her dad and said, "It was really good, Daddy. We'll probably be doing that a lot more." For the rest of the night, I answered questions for Maria, still in Ada's body, as we encouraged guests to leave. After the last one left around 2 in the morning, she grabbed my hand and dragged me upstairs. "I've been waiting for this," she said. She seemed to know the layout of the house, which should have raised a red flag, but I was too caught up in the moment. She quickly undressed, and standing without clothes before me, my body reacted. Despite the familiarity of Ada's body, the fact that someone else was inside of it added an odd excitement. I felt a pang of guilt, but it didn't last long. She teased, "Don't hurt me. I've never done this before," before pulling me into an intense embrace. We kissed deeply, and it felt electric. We stayed locked in that moment for what seemed like forever before finally falling into bed together. Everything about making love to her felt familiar. I'd been with Ada for 7 years, and though I tried to convince myself that the similarities were due to the shared body, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was Maria's spirit driving it all. The next morning, Maria woke up smiling. "Last night was worth waiting 7 years for. Promise we'll do this every night." "There'll be nights when we can't," I said hesitantly. "That's nonsense," she replied. "You're not afraid of a little blood, are you? And there are always other options." That confirmed it was Maria. Ada had never been into rear penetration, finding it disgusting. For a week, we didn't leave the house, spending most of our time in bed. But I knew there would be challenges ahead. Maria had died as a high schooler. She hadn't gone to college, earned Ada's degree, or worked her job. She wouldn't be able to fake Ada's career or the relationships Ada had built over the years. No matter how well she tried, she couldn't convincingly be Ada in the long run. The worst part, though, was realizing that while I had longed for Maria all these years, now that I had her back, I missed Ada. I had shared 2 brief years of youthful fun with Maria, but over 7 years, I had built a real life with Ada. After a few intense weeks with Maria, I found myself aching for my wife again. One afternoon, while daydreaming about something Ada had said, I found myself crying because I missed her so much. Maria saw me and lost it. "Why are you crying, Wayne?" she demanded. When I didn't answer, she figured it out. "You're crying over that hoe, aren't you?" she screamed. "Well, stop it. You're stuck with me now, so get over it." And that was exactly how I felt, stuck. The next day at work, I was surprised to hear my secretary tell me I had an appointment Ada had set up weeks ago. The door opened and Ace walked in. "What are you doing here?" I snapped. "Wayne, we're old friends," he said. "After what happened with Ada, how could we ever be friends?" I asked. "What are you talking about?" he said, confused. Then it hit him. "Oh, you don't know, do you?" "No what?" I asked angrily. "That you had an affair with my wife?" "No, dumbass," he replied. "I always thought you were the smarter one. Call me when you figure it out." "Wait, Ace, what's going on?" I asked. He sighed and explained that he'd grown up since college. In high school, everyone liked me because I was dependable, while he had been arrogant, thinking he could have whatever he wanted, including Ada. He admitted that he treated her poorly in college, assuming she was his by default, but he regretted his actions. He said Ada had forgiven him. And recently she had asked for his help to make me jealous so I'd start paying attention to her again. It had all been an act. Ace then showed me pictures of his wife, Brenda, and their kids, saying how much he loved her. He assured me that nothing ever happened between him and Ada. She loved me too much to cheat on me. His words hit me hard. I had ruined my life for a fantasy. Ace, you can have any job you want, I told him. I'll call HR and arrange it. Thanks, Wayne, he said. Say hi to Ada for me. After he left, I locked the door and broke down in tears. I knew I had made a huge mistake, but I had to find a way to fix it. There had to be a way to get Ada back. I left the office and drove around in my new Mustang. The car had over 500 horsepower and lots of custom features, which always helped me clear my mind. After a while, I pulled into a park to think. It didn't take long to realize that I wanted Ada back, more than I had ever wanted Maria. Being near Maria made me feel like I was cheating on my wife. If it was the last thing I did, if it cost me everything, I'd get Ada back. I believed that whatever had happened could be undone, but I was certain Maria wasn't going to help me. When I got home much later than usual, Maria was waiting for me. "Where were you?" she asked. "We need to talk." "Maria, you can have whatever you want," I said. "You're alive again and in my wife's body. You can take all my money. I can't give you the company since it has to stay in the family, and I've realized I can't give you my heart either." She didn't scream or get upset as I expected. She just listened. "Maria, I loved you when I was young, but I've grown up. What I have with Ada is real love, and I let it slip away." "But that hoe cheated on you," she spat. "Don't ever call her that again," I said, standing up. "And she didn't cheat. She was just trying to make me see what I had. If anything, I cheated on her with you. Though, is it cheating with a ghost?" "You didn't cheat," she said. "And she wasn't really a ghost. She was a succubus. She'd haunted her sister's family for years until she gave her sister that diary to pass on to you. Once the book got to you, she used it to drain your energy and grow stronger." "But how?" I asked. "How did you get your body back?" "I never lost it," she smiled. "It's been me all along. I pretended to be her to see if you really wanted her or me. Now that you've had your chance with her, I hope you'll leave her in the past." "But you acted so much like her," I said. "That was easy," she replied. "I watched her with you for years. All I had to do was act angry at everyone but you and never let you out of my sight." "But what about everything else?" I started. "Look, Wayne," she said, "I love you. I always have. We had an amazing relationship until you shut me out to be with her. I was desperate, and yeah, letting you do things like rear penetration was worth it if it meant getting you back. I'd do anything for you. She may have been the woman of your dreams, but I'm the one who's really here." "No, I said. "You're the woman of my dreams. And don't you forget it," she smirked. "So how did you, and where is she?" I asked. "I checked the den about a week after this all started," she said. "I saw you moving like you were humping the air, and I got furious. I thought, why is he doing that when I'd gladly let him have me anytime, anywhere? Then I saw her. Whether it was my anger or my love for you, I finally saw Maria. I also realized she was draining the life out of you. So I went to New Orleans to see a gypsy who knows about these things. She told me what Maria had become and gave me ways to protect myself. She said succubi usually just feed off their victims until they die, but powerful ones can take over the body of someone close to the victim. And despite everything, Maria loved you, Wayne. The gypsy thought Maria stayed on Earth because she had unfinished business with you. We figured that her unfinished business was having sex with the man she loved. If you two had ever slept together, I'd have been finished. So the gypsy gave me a necklace to trap Maria's spirit and a spell. It worked. Instead of Maria taking over my body, she ended up in the necklace, and I pretended to be her. You have no idea how good it felt to see you realize that you love me. I was always scared that I was second in your heart, behind her. I would have pretended to be Maria forever if it meant staying close to you. Soon we'll go back to the gypsy to help Maria's spirit move on," she added with a smile. I love you so much," I said. "Please forgive me. I'll never take you for granted again. No one else will ever have even a piece of my heart. I've always loved you, but there was just that small part of my heart that, Wayne, your heart is bigger than you think, and it's going to have to stretch a little more," she said. I looked at her, confused. "Can we talk about this in bed?" I asked. Her face lit up and I knew everything would be fine. "Okay," she agreed, "but it's going to have to be gentle and loving until I get used to this. No wild stuff until my body adjusts." "But I thought Maria never took over your body." "Was there a time when both of you were in there?" I asked. "Funny you mention periods," she said, "because mine is really, really late. I went to the doctor and it turns out there are two of us in here. But it's me and your baby, not me and your high school sweetheart." I took her into my arms and carried her upstairs. We made slow, passionate love and then lay in each other's arms. "This is how it's supposed to be, Wayne," she said, kissing me. "Wayne, we need to start thinking about names. If it's a boy, we're naming him after my grandfather. His name was Gumford, and we'll call him Gum for short. If it's a girl," I began. "We're not naming her Maria," she snapped. I laughed. "I was thinking of naming her after your mother. I like the name Penelope. We can call her Penny for short." Over the next 2 years, we had 2 kids, a girl and a boy, and we did use those names. Our family thrived, and we loved each other deeply. We all lived happily ever after, especially on Halloween, when we were very popular. After all, it wouldn't be Halloween without trick-or-treating and all the fun that comes with it, especially for Wayne Dwops, I Dwops, Penny Dwops, and of course, Gum Dwops.